The morning Eliza's life changed forever started ordinary enough, which should have been her first warning. She was bent over her sewing table when the knock came, three sharp raps that made her needle slip and prick her thumb. A drop of blood welled up, bright against her pale skin. She pressed it into her apron and stood, already knowing from the weight of that knock that nothing good waited on the other side of her door. Mayor Hutchins filled her doorway like a bad omen, his bulk blocking the spring sunlight. Behind him stood Councilman Bradford and his son Thomas. All three wore their Sunday suits on a Tuesday, which told her everything about how seriously they took whatever business brought them here. "Miss Rowan." Hutchins removed his hat, but didn't wait for an invitation before stepping inside. The other two followed, and suddenly her small shop felt suffocating. "We need to have a conversation about your situation." "My situation." Eliza's voice came out steadier than she felt. She'd been invisible in this town for a decade. The quiet seamstress who fixed hems and kept her head down. What situation could she possibly have? "Your lease." Bradford pulled a document from his jacket, unfolding it with theatrical precision. "It comes up for renewal next month." "I'm aware." She'd already set aside the payment. It had taken 6 months of careful saving, but she had it. "The building's been sold." Hutchins said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. "New owners raised the rent, tripled it, actually." The floor seemed to tilt under her feet. You can't. It's legal." Thomas Bradford spoke for the first time, his voice carrying that particular smugness of young men who'd never been told no. "The property changed hands last week. Father bought it as an investment." "Of course he did." Eliza looked at the three men crowding her workspace, at the careful arrangement of their faces. Hutchins playing reluctant messenger, Bradford Sr. the concerned businessman, Thomas the helpful, solution waiting in the wings. This wasn't about rent. This was a cage closing. "However," Hutchins continued, "we're not unreasonable men. We understand a woman in your position has limited options." "My position." She repeated the phrase, tasting its bitterness. Bradford stepped forward, and she saw him truly consider her for the first time, calculating, measuring her worth like she was livestock. "You're 32 years old, unmarried, no family, operating a business that barely sustains you. In short, Miss Rowan, you're vulnerable." The word hung in the air between them like a threat. "But you're also respectable," Hutchins added quickly. "Quiet, well-mannered, the kind of woman who'd make a suitable wife for the right man." He gestured to Thomas. "My colleague's son has expressed interest in settling down. This could solve everyone's problems." Eliza's mind raced. Thomas Bradford was 25, arrogant, and known for keeping company with the working girls at the saloon. Last year, one of them had left town suddenly, with a swollen belly and enough money to disappear. These were the men offering her salvation. "And if I decline this generous offer?" She kept her voice level, professional, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The three men exchanged glances. Bradford folded the lease papers and tucked them back into his jacket. "Then you'll need to vacate the premises by month's end. The new tenant's already been selected." "You planned this." The realization hit her like cold water. "All of it." "We're offering you security," Thomas said, and had the audacity to sound offended. "Most women would be grateful." "I need time to think." "You have 48 hours. Hutchins replaced his hat. "After that, the offer expires and you'll need to make other arrangements. I trust you'll make the sensible choice." They left her standing in the wreckage of her life, the door closing with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. Eliza didn't move for a long moment. Then she walked to her window and stared out at the main street of Redemption, Colorado, a town that had never redeemed anyone as far as she could tell. Dust devils danced between the buildings. A woman hurried past with her shopping, head down, invisible. That had been Eliza for 10 years, safe in her invisibility. Until now. The bell above her door chimed again. She turned, exhausted, expecting another vulture come to pick at her carcass. Instead, she found Sarah Mitchell, the baker's wife, and the closest thing Eliza had to a friend in this town. "I saw them leave." Sarah's round face was tight with concern. "What did they want?" Eliza told her. Sarah's expression darkened with each word. "Those bastards." Sarah rarely cursed, which made it more satisfying when she did. This is about the widow's ordinance. The what? You haven't heard? Sarah set down her basket and pulled out a chair uninvited. Town council passed it last month. Any woman over 30, unmarried and without male relatives, must either marry within 6 months or forfeit property ownership rights. They're calling it Protecting Vulnerable Women from Exploitation. Eliza laughed, a brittle sound. By exploiting us themselves. Exactly. Sarah reached across and gripped her hand. There are 5 other women in similar positions. The council's been circling like sharks. Margaret Thorne accepted Councilman Wilson's proposal last week. She cried through the entire ceremony. Why didn't anyone fight it? Who would we fight? They own everything. The land, the businesses, the law. Sarah's voice dropped. And they're careful. On paper, it's all legal. They're just helping unfortunate women find security. Eliza pulled her hand back and stood, pacing her small shop. There has to be another way. If there is, no one's found it yet. Sarah hesitated. What will you do? I don't know. But even as she said it, something hardened in her chest. She'd been running from her past for 10 years, hiding in plain sight, letting herself be invisible because invisible was safe. And where had safe gotten her? Trapped, cornered, forced to choose between her freedom and her survival. Sarah left eventually, promising to ask her husband if he'd heard any other options. Eliza knew there weren't any. She'd known it the moment Hutchins walked through her door. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat at her window watching the town settle into darkness, oil lamps winking out one by one. Somewhere out there, Thomas Bradford was probably celebrating his upcoming nuptials, confident she'd accept. Why wouldn't she? Women like Eliza didn't have choices. Except she did have a choice. She could leave. The thought struck her at midnight, sudden and wild. She could pack a bag, take what money she had, and disappear. Head west to California or north to Denver, start over somewhere new, become invisible in a different town. But even as she considered it, she knew she wouldn't. She was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being erased. If they wanted to force her into a corner, fine. But she wouldn't go quietly. The next day dawned clear and cold. Eliza opened her shop at the usual time, though she had no appointments. Word had spread fast. Women who'd promised to collect their mending had sent their husbands with excuses. No one wanted to be associated with a woman marked for marriage by the town council. Contamination by proximity. She was measuring thread she didn't need when the bell chimed again. This time, the man who entered made her workshop feel even smaller, though he was lean rather than bulky. Tall, weathered, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and eyes that had seen things most men only heard about in stories. He wore ranch clothes, dusty but well-made, and moved with the careful economy of someone who'd learned that wasted motion could get you killed. Caleb Vance. She knew him by reputation only. He owned the largest ranch in the county, running cattle and horses across land that stretched to the horizon. He came to town rarely, kept to himself, and had a reputation for being fair but hard. Men respected him. Women whispered about him. The widower who'd never remarried, who'd lost his wife in childbirth along with the baby, who'd turned his grief into an empire of dirt and cattle. He stood in her doorway for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her want to check her reflection. Then he removed his hat. Miss Rowan. His voice matched his appearance, rough, direct, no wasted words. I heard about your situation. She stiffened. The whole town's heard, apparently. Probably. He didn't apologize for it. I have a proposition. I've had enough propositions to last a lifetime. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. This one's different. Marry me instead. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. Excuse me? You need a husband. I need a wife. He said it like he was discussing a business transaction. We can help each other. Eliza found her voice, along with her anger. Let me understand this. 3 men corner me yesterday with the same offer, and now you show up like some kind of savior? What makes your proposal any different from theirs? I'm not trying to trap you. He met her eyes steadily. And I'm giving you a real choice. Say yes or say no, but either way, I'll make sure Bradford doesn't get his hands on this building. Why? She crossed her arms. Why would you do that? Caleb was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. Because I remember what it's like to be backed into a corner with no good options, and because those men down at the council are vultures. They're using that widow's ordinance to consolidate power, forcing women into marriages that benefit them. It's legal, but it's not right. So this is about justice? She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. This is about two people making a choice instead of having choices made for them. He set his hat on her counter. I won't lie to you. I'm not offering romance. My ranch needs a woman's presence. I've got men who need feeding, a house that's falling apart, business that requires a hostess. You'd earn your keep, but you'd have your freedom too. Keep your shop if you want. Come and go as you please. What's mine becomes legally yours. The ranch, the land, the accounts. If it doesn't work out, you can leave and keep your half. Eliza studied him, trying to find the trap. That's insane. You'd give a stranger half of everything you own? I'd give a wife her legal due. That's not charity, that's the law. He paused. I'm 46 years old, Miss Rowan. I've built something worth having, but I'm tired of building it alone. I need a partner, not a servant. You need security and respect. Seems like a fair trade to me. You know nothing about me. I know you've run this shop for 10 years without causing trouble or asking for help. I know you're resourceful enough to survive in a town that doesn't make it easy for women alone. And I know you've got spine enough to be angry instead of grateful when men try to control you. His eyes held hers. That's enough. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to cry. She wanted to throw him out and bar the door. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What happened to your wife?" Pain flickered across his face, gone almost before she saw it. Died 8 years ago. Childbirth. The baby didn't make it either. I'm sorry. So am I. He picked up his hat. I'm not looking to replace her. That's not what this is. This is two people making a practical arrangement that benefits both parties. You can think about it, yes. The word came out before she'd fully decided to say it. Caleb froze, hat halfway to his head. Yes, he repeated. Yes. Eliza's heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. I'll marry you. He studied her for a long moment. You're sure? No. She laughed, sharp and a little wild. But I'm not sure about anything anymore, so I might as well choose the devil I don't know over the ones I do. Fair enough. He extended his hand. She took it, and they shook like business partners, which she supposed they were. His grip was calloused and warm. I'll make the arrangements. We can do it tomorrow if you're willing. Tomorrow? She tested the word. That fast? No point waiting. Gives people less time to interfere. He headed for the door, then paused. Pack what you need from here. I'll send a wagon for the rest. After he left, Eliza sat down hard on her stool and stared at her hands. They were shaking. She'd just agreed to marry a man she'd spoken to for less than 10 minutes. A man she knew only by reputation and rumor. A man who looked at her like she was a problem to be solved rather than a woman to be wooed. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. A spark of possibility. The bell chimed again. This time it was Thomas Bradford, his smile slick with presumed victory. Miss Rowan, I thought I'd check in, see if you'd had time to consider— I'm getting married tomorrow, she interrupted. To Caleb Vance. So you can tell your father the building's already spoken for, and so am I. The color drained from Thomas's face. You can't be serious. Completely serious. She stood, feeling taller than her 5'4" frame. Now get out of my shop. I have packing to do. He sputtered protests, threats about legal action, warnings about what his father would do. She ignored all of it until he finally left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Eliza permitted herself a small, vicious smile. Then she started packing. News traveled faster than wildfire in Redemption. By sunset, half the town knew. By midnight, everyone knew. Eliza lay awake in her small room above the shop, listening to voices drift up from the street. Shock, speculation, outrage. She was making a mistake. She was being reckless. Caleb Vance was dangerous, unstable, too hard for a woman like her. Let them talk. Morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. Eliza dressed in her best dress, dark blue wool, practical but well made. Her own work. She pinned her dark hair up carefully, then stared at her reflection. 32 years old, ordinary brown eyes, a face that had never turned heads. the invisible woman. After today, she'd never be invisible again. The ceremony took place at the courthouse, small and quick. Caleb wore a clean shirt and jacket. Sarah Mitchell stood as witness, her husband beside her. The judge, a friend of Caleb's apparently, performed the service with professional detachment. The whole thing took less than 15 minutes. When the judge pronounced them married, Caleb kissed her cheek. Brief, formal, nothing more. His lips were warm. She tried not to think about what came next. They signed the papers. Caleb produced a ring, simple gold, sized properly somehow. She wondered if it had been his first wife's, but didn't ask. Some questions could wait. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. The Bradfords stood front and center, matching expressions of fury poorly masked as concern. Other council members clustered nearby, and scattered among them, women, the other targets of the widow's ordinance, watching Eliza with expressions ranging from envy to terror. Mayor Hutchins stepped forward. "Caleb, a word?" "We're done talking, Hutchins." Caleb took Eliza's arm, his grip gentle but firm. "My wife and I have business to attend to." The word wife rippled through the crowd like a stone in water. Eliza felt their stares, their judgment, their fear of what she represented, a woman who'd slipped the noose, who'd chosen her own trap. A wagon waited at the edge of town, loaded with her possessions. Caleb helped her up onto the seat with the same careful courtesy, then climbed up beside her. He took the reins and the wagon lurched forward. They left redemption behind, dust rising in their wake. Eliza didn't look back. The ranch appeared after an hour's drive, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley with mountains rising blue in the distance. The main house was larger than she'd expected, 2 stories of weathered wood and stone, wraparound porch, windows that caught the afternoon light. Barns and outbuildings scattered across the property, corrals filled with horses, cattle dotting the distant hills. It was beautiful. It was intimidating. It was hers now, legally. The thought made her dizzy. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Men emerged from various buildings, ranch hands, 7 or 8 of them, ranging from a grizzled man who had to be 60 to a boy barely old enough to shave. They all stopped and stared. "This is my wife, Eliza," Caleb announced. No preamble. "Anyone has a problem with that can collect their pay and leave now." Silence. Then the old man stepped forward, hat in hand. "Ma'am, name's Joe. I run the bunkhouse and the hands. You need anything? You let me know." The others followed suit, introducing themselves one by one. Eliza tried to remember names. Marcus, the foreman. Young Billy, who couldn't be more than 16. Others whose faces blurred together. They were polite, curious, measuring her the way men measured everything new on a ranch. Would she last? Would she cause trouble? Was she worth the disruption? She'd find out. They all would. Caleb showed her inside. The house was clean but sparse, functional but cold. A man's house, unlived in despite having an occupant. Rooms that echoed. Furniture that served a purpose without comfort. She could see his first wife's absence in every empty corner, every bare wall. "Your room's upstairs?" Caleb led her up narrow stairs to a large bedroom facing east. A bed, a wardrobe, a washstand. "There's a connecting door to mine, but it locks on your side. Use it or don't. Your choice." She looked at the door in question, solid oak with a heavy bolt. "And if I choose not to?" "Then we have a marriage of convenience and nothing more." He met her eyes. "I meant what I said. This is about partnership, not ownership. Whatever happens between us happens because we both want it." Eliza studied him in the afternoon light. He'd removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. She could see scars on his forearms, the evidence of a life lived hard. "You're a strange man, Caleb Vance." "Probably." He moved toward the door. "Get settled. Dinner's at 6. I'll introduce you to the cook." After he left, Eliza sat on the bed and looked around her new room. Through the window, she could see the valley spreading out in shades of gold and green, the mountains standing guard at the horizon. Somewhere in Redemption, the Bradfords were plotting their revenge. Somewhere in town, women were whispering about her recklessness. She didn't care. For the first time in 10 years, she'd made a choice that was entirely hers. She'd pay the price for it. She already knew the town wouldn't let this stand without a fight, but she'd pay on her own terms, with her eyes open. Eliza unpacked her few belongings, hanging dresses in the wardrobe, setting out her sewing kit on the small table by the window. This room was twice the size of her entire apartment above the shop. She could breathe here. At 6, she went down to dinner. The dining room held a long table that could seat 12 easily. Currently, it held only 2 place settings, one at each end. Caleb was already seated, reading a letter, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. He stood when she entered. "There's wine if you want it. Or water. Coffee too, though Cookie makes it strong enough to strip paint." She poured wine, needing something to steady her nerves. They ate in relative silence, roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. The food was good, plain but well prepared. She could hear male voices from somewhere outside, the hands eating their own dinner. "They'll adjust to you," Caleb said suddenly, startling her. "The men. They're not used to a woman around, but they'll adjust. And if they don't, then they'll find work elsewhere." He cut his chicken with precise movements. "You're mistress of this house now. What you say goes." Eliza sipped her wine, considering. "Does that authority extend to you?" He looked up, and she caught something that might have been amusement in his eyes. "In the house? Absolutely. Outside, we'll have to negotiate." "Fair enough." After dinner, Caleb retreated to his study with his correspondence. Eliza explored the house, taking inventory. The kitchen was large and well-stocked, ruled by a compact woman named Pearl, who looked Eliza over with sharp eyes before offering terse acceptance. The parlor held furniture covered in dust sheets. The library was small but surprisingly well-stocked. She found Caleb there later, sitting by the fire with a book. He glanced up when she entered. "Can't sleep?" "Too much has happened." She moved to the shelves, scanning titles. "You have good taste in books." "My wife's collection." He said it matter-of-factly, no emotion visible. She liked to read. Eliza pulled down a volume, poetry, worn with reading. "You kept them." "Didn't see a reason not to." He turned a page of his own book. "You can read anything you want. Add to it if you like." She sat in the chair across from him, still holding the poetry book. The fire crackled between them. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the valley. "Why did you really marry me?" The question came out before she could stop it. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I told you, I needed a wife." "You could have married anyone. Women who actually wanted you, not women desperate to escape." "Women who wanted my land, you mean? My money." He closed his book and set it aside. "I've had plenty of those sniffing around over the years. Every widow within 50 miles, every unmarried daughter from families looking to marry up. They looked at me and saw profit margins. You looked at me and saw a way out. At least that's honest." "It is," she agreed. "But it doesn't answer my question." He stared into the fire. "I saw you once, about 5 years ago. I'd come to town for supplies and my horse threw a shoe. I brought him to your shop because you were the only one open. You fixed the hem on my jacket while I waited. I'd torn it on barbed wire and hadn't noticed until that day. You worked fast, never looked up, never tried to make conversation. When you handed it back, the repair was invisible. You charged me fair and sent me on my way. I remember thinking you were the first person in years who'd treated me like I was just a customer instead of a fortune on legs." Eliza blinked, surprised. "I don't remember that." "No reason you should. But I remembered you." He met her eyes. "When I heard what the council was doing, I thought about those women they were targeting. Most of them I knew were social climbers or gossips, women who'd make my life hell within a week. But you just wanted to be left alone. Seemed to me that was something worth respecting." "So you married me out of respect?" "And self-interest. Like I said, I need a partner, not a leech. You're practical, hardworking, and honest. That's rarer than you'd think." She didn't know what to say to that. They sat in silence for a while, the fire burning down to embers. Finally, Eliza stood. "Thank you for being honest." "Same to you." He picked up his book again. "Good night, Eliza." "Good night." In her room, she prepared for bed, moving through the familiar routine and unfamiliar surroundings. She could hear Caleb moving around in the next room, floorboards creaking as he got ready for sleep. The connecting door sat between them, locked on her side. She stared at it for a long time before finally climbing into bed. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Storm coming, maybe. Eliza lay in the dark, listening to her new house settle around her, and wondered what she'd just started. In town, the Bradfords sat in their parlor, plotting. On the ranch hands whispered in the bunkhouse about the new mistress. And in two separate rooms, separated by a locked door, two strangers who'd just promised their lives to each other lay awake, wondering if they'd made the biggest mistake of their lives or the smartest decision they'd ever make. Time would tell. But one thing was already certain. Nothing would ever be the same. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment and silent warfare. Eliza woke before dawn that first morning to find the house already alive with activity. Men's voices carried from the yard, horses nickered in the corrals, and somewhere a hammer rang against metal. She dressed quickly, fumbling with buttons in the gray light, and made her way downstairs. Pearl stood at the massive kitchen stove, working 3 pans at once while a pot of coffee boiled on the back burner. She glanced at Eliza without slowing her rhythm. Hands eat at 5:30. Caleb eats at 6. You want breakfast? Best grab it between the chaos, or wait until 7 when things settle. I can help. Pearl's eyebrow rose. You cook? Well enough. Eliza rolled up her sleeves. Tell me what needs doing. For a moment, Pearl just stared. Then she jerked her chin toward a bowl of eggs. Those need scrambling. 16 of them. And don't make them runny. Cowboys hate runny eggs. They worked in silence, broken only by Pearl's terse instructions. At 5:30, the back door crashed open and men flooded in, bringing the smell of horses and leather and dawn cold. They lined up at the long table in the kitchen, grabbing plates, loading them with food, eating standing or perched on counters. The noise was tremendous. Marcus, the foreman, paused when he saw Eliza at the stove. Ma'am, you don't need to be serving us. I'm not serving. I'm helping Pearl. She slid more eggs onto the platter. Unless you'd rather go hungry while we debate propriety. A few of the men laughed. Marcus took his plate and moved on. Caleb appeared at 6 exactly, like he had an internal clock. He stopped in the kitchen doorway, taking in the scene, Eliza flour dusted and frying bacon while Pearl worked the eggs, both women moving in the controlled chaos of feeding an army. Morning. He poured himself coffee, black and steaming. Sleep well? Well enough. Eliza flipped bacon, trying to look competent. You. Same as always, Pearl snorted. Which means he didn't. Man sleeps 4 hours a night and wonders why he's always in a mood. Caleb ignored this, taking his coffee to the dining room. Eliza followed with a plate 10 minutes later, her own breakfast balanced on top. They ate in that same stretched silence, the sound of ranch life filtering through the windows. I'm riding out to check the north pasture today, Caleb said finally. Be gone most of the day. Marcus knows where I am if you need anything. I'll be fine. He studied her over his coffee cup. You don't have to prove anything, you know, not to them, not to me. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to be useful. You're already useful. You married me, which solved both our problems. He stood, draining his cup. But suit yourself. Just don't let Pearl work you to death on day 1. She'll try. After he left, Eliza helped Pearl clean the kitchen. Then she explored this house properly, taking inventory. The place was massive and mostly empty. Rooms upon rooms filled with furniture, but no life. It felt like a museum to someone else's existence. She found Caleb's first wife in the details. A dried flower pressed in a book. Curtains that had been chosen with care, but were now faded. A music box on the mantel that played a waltz when wound. Eliza touched it gently, then left it alone. That grief wasn't hers to disturb. By midday, she was restless. The house felt like a cage, beautiful but confining. She found her way to the barn, where young Billy was mucking stalls. Ma'am? He straightened, pitchfork in hand, looking alarmed. Something wrong? I need a horse. The words came out more certain than she felt. Something calm. You ride? I did once, long time ago. Before redemption, before she'd learned that being invisible meant being safe. I'm probably terrible at it now, but I'd like to try. Billy wiped his hands on his pants and led her to a chestnut mare with a white blaze. This here's Rosie. She's old and lazy and won't do nothing exciting. Perfect for getting back into it. Eliza eyed the horse, who eyed her back with equal suspicion. She looks annoyed. She's always annoyed. That's just her face. Billy saddled the mare with quick efficiency, then helped Eliza mount. You remember how to sit? I think so. Eliza gripped the reins, feeling the horse shift under her. Her body remembered this, muscle memory from years ago surfacing like something lost underwater. "How do I look?" "Like you might fall off, but probably won't," Billy grinned. "Just keep her to a walk and stay inside of the house. Mr. Vance would skin me if you got hurt on my watch." Eliza rode out slowly, Rosie plodding along with the enthusiasm of someone doing a chore. But once they were away from the buildings, something loosened in Eliza's chest. The valley spread out around her, vast and open. The wind smelled like sage and distance. She urged Rosie into a trot, bouncing awkwardly before finding the rhythm. She rode for an hour, relearning her body's relationship with movement and freedom. When she returned, Caleb was back early, standing in the yard talking to Marcus. He watched her approach, his expression unreadable. Eliza dismounted, trying to look graceful and probably failing. Caleb walked over and took Rosie's reins. "Didn't know you could ride." "I can't, really, but Billy said Rosie wouldn't let me do anything stupid." Billy was right. He handed the reins to the boy who'd appeared to collect the horse. How was it? Terrifying and wonderful. Eliza pulled off her borrowed hat, her hair escaping its pins. I'd forgotten what it felt like to move. Something shifted in Caleb's face, gone before she could name it. "You can ride whenever you want. Take any horse except the paint stallion. He's mean. And tell someone where you're going. In case I fall off and die? In case you fall off and need help." He started toward the house. "Also, you'll be sore tomorrow. Pearl makes a liniment that helps." He was right. The next morning, Eliza woke to muscles she'd forgotten existed screaming in protest. She limped downstairs to find Pearl already mixing something pungent in a jar. "Heard you went riding." Pearl handed over the liniment. "Rub this on everything that hurts. It smells like death, but it works." It did smell like death. It also worked. The days developed a rhythm. Eliza helped with breakfast, then spent mornings managing the house, cleaning, organizing, making lists of what needed fixing. Afternoons she spent riding or in her old workshop space that she set up in an unused room, taking in mending from the ranch hands who were too shy to ask directly but left clothes outside her door. Evenings she and Caleb ate dinner in that same stretched silence, then retreated to separate spaces. They were polite strangers sharing a house, nothing more. Then, on day 8, the town came calling. Eliza was in the garden behind the house, trying to resurrect the vegetable patch that had gone wild, when she heard horses. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt, and walked around to the front. 3 riders. Mayor Hutchins, Councilman Bradford, and Thomas, all wearing their civic duty faces. Caleb emerged from the barn, Marcus at his shoulder. He saw the visitors and his expression went carefully blank. "Gentlemen, this is unexpected." Hutchins dismounted, smile fixed and false. "Caleb, we need to talk. Official business." "Then talk." "Perhaps somewhere more private?" Bradford's eyes flicked to Eliza, who'd moved to stand on the porch. "This is council business. My wife can hear anything you have to say to me." Caleb's voice could have cut glass. "So say it." The 3 men exchanged glances. Thomas spoke first, unable to hide his satisfaction. "There's been a complaint filed against you, regarding the circumstances of your marriage." Eliza's stomach dropped. Caleb didn't move. "What kind of complaint?" "Coercion." Bradford pulled out a document, unfolding it with the same theatrical precision he'd used in her shop. "An allegation that you forced Miss Mrs. Vance into marriage through threats and intimidation." "That's insane." Eliza stepped off the porch. "No one forced me to do anything." "We have a witness who says otherwise." Thomas couldn't keep the smugness from his voice. "Someone who overheard Mr. Vance threatening to destroy your business if you didn't accept his proposal." "Who?" Caleb's voice stayed level, but Eliza could see tension in his shoulders. "Who made this claim?" "Anonymous, but credible." "Meaning you made it up." Eliza moved to stand beside Caleb. "This is retaliation because I didn't marry Thomas like you wanted." Hutchins raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Now, Mrs. Vance, I understand you're upset, but we have a responsibility to investigate any allegations of impropriety, especially given the speed of your courtship. You married within 24 hours of being introduced. Surely you can see how that raises questions. The only question it raises is why 3 grown men are so obsessed with my marriage. She crossed her arms. I'm 32 years old and of sound mind. I chose to marry Caleb. That's the end of it. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Bradford tapped the document. The territorial governor takes allegations of coercion very seriously. There's going to be an inquiry. If Mr. Vance is found guilty, the marriage could be annulled and he could face criminal charges. Caleb laughed, short and bitter. You must be desperate. This won't hold up to any actual scrutiny. Maybe not. But the inquiry itself will be interesting, won't it? Thomas stepped forward. All those questions about your finances, your business dealings, your land acquisitions? I imagine the territorial office will want to examine everything very carefully. Could take months, maybe years. There it was, the real threat. They couldn't force Eliza into marriage now, but they could destroy Caleb with legal fees and investigations, tie up his assets, ruin his reputation. And if the marriage was annulled, Eliza would be right back where she started, alone, vulnerable, and without protection. When's the inquiry? Caleb asked. 2 weeks. Territorial judge is coming through. You'll both need to testify. Hutchins remounted his horse. I'm sorry it's come to this, Caleb, but you have to understand we have rules for a reason. You can't just sweep in and disrupt the natural order of things. Natural order? Eliza tasted the words, bitter as ashes. You mean your control. Bradford smiled, cold and satisfied. Call it what you want, Mrs. Vance. You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences. They rode out, dust rising behind them. Eliza and Caleb stood in the yard, watching them disappear. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. This is my fault. No. Caleb turned to face her. This is them showing us what happens when someone challenges their authority. They'll try to make an example of us. Can they win? Depends on the judge. Depends on how dirty they're willing to fight. He rubbed his jaw, thinking. We need a lawyer, a good one. Marcus, who'd been standing silent witness, cleared his throat. There's a man in Denver, Samuel Blackwood, handles territorial disputes. He's expensive, but he wins. Send a telegram. Tell him to get down here fast. Caleb looked at Eliza. This is going to get ugly. If you want out, now's the time. I can arrange for you to go somewhere safe until... No. Her voice came out harder than intended. I'm not running. They want to make me a victim? Fine, let them try. But I won't cooperate. Something like respect crossed Caleb's face. All right then, we fight. Word of the inquiry spread faster than the marriage announcement. Within days, the whole territory knew. Ranch hands grew nervous, whispering in corners. Supplies from town started arriving short or late. Small acts of sabotage that added up, a broken fence here, cattle driven off there, nothing provable, but all pointing the same direction. The town was making its displeasure known. Sarah Mitchell appeared 3 days after the council's visit, driving her wagon out alone in defiance of her husband's likely orders. Pearl showed her to the parlor where Eliza was attempting to organize 8 years of neglected paperwork. You look terrible. Sarah set down a basket of bread and preserves. I feel terrible. Eliza abandoned the papers. Tell me something good. Lie to me if you have to. Can't lie. Everything in town is chaos. Sarah sat heavily. The council's telling anyone who'll listen that Caleb's a predator who trapped you. Half the women believe it because it fits their view of men. The other half think you're a scheming harlot who seduced a grieving widower. I can't be both a victim and a villain. You can in redemption. Sarah's face was grim. Margaret Thorne recanted her marriage to Wilson, says she was coerced. The council's using her as evidence that the widow's ordinance was necessary protection, and women like you who refuse it are either being forced or are too foolish to know better. Eliza's hands clenched. Margaret cried through her whole wedding. Everyone saw it. Everyone saw what they wanted to see. A woman being properly married off, tears of joy, all that nonsense. Sarah leaned forward. There's talk of expanding the ordinance, making it mandatory. Any unmarried woman over 25 must marry within 90 days or face property seizure and possible institutionalization. They can't do that. They're the territorial council. They can do whatever they want until someone with more power tells them to stop. Sarah pulled out a folded newspaper. This ran in the territorial paper 2 days ago. Eliza read the headline: Frontier Town Battles Marriage Epidemic. Council takes action to protect vulnerable women. The article painted the council as heroes fighting against unscrupulous men preying on desperate women. It mentioned Caleb by name, called him a reclusive rancher with questionable business practices who'd acquired a wife under suspicious circumstances. This is coordinated. Eliza set down the paper before she could tear it apart. They're building a case in the court of public opinion before the real trial even starts. Smart Money says the judge is already friendly with the council. Sarah took back the paper. I'm sorry, Eliza. I wish I had better news. After Sarah left, Eliza found Caleb in his study, surrounded by ledgers and correspondence. He looked up when she entered, saw her face, and set down his pen. How bad? She told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each detail. They're going to paint you as either a fool or a liar, he said finally. Claim you were either coerced or you're lying about the coercion to protect me. Either way, you lose credibility. What about you? I'm a rich man who married suspiciously fast. They'll suggest I have something to hide. He stood and moved to the window. The inquiry's a smokescreen. They want access to my books, my property records, everything. Once they're in, they'll find something, real or manufactured, to use against me. So what do we do? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. We give them a story they can't argue with, a marriage that looks real enough that no one can claim it's fake. Eliza understood immediately. You want us to pretend to be in love. Not love, partnership, mutual respect, the kind of marriage that makes sense to everyone watching. He turned to face her. We attend social events together. We're seen in town. We present a united front. Make it impossible for them to claim you were forced. You hate town events. I do, but I hate losing more. His eyes met hers. Can you do it? Play the devoted wife in public? Eliza thought about the alternative. Annulment, returning to redemption alone, facing the council's wrath without protection. Can you play the devoted husband? I can try. The first test came Sunday. Redemption had a community gathering every month, equal parts market and social event. Caleb hadn't attended in years. Their arrival would be a declaration. Eliza dressed carefully in her best dress, the dark blue wool she'd worn to the wedding, but this time she added small touches. A ribbon at her throat. Her hair arranged more carefully. Pearl even offered a brooch, small and silver, that had belonged to Caleb's mother. When she came downstairs, Caleb stood waiting in his Sunday suit. He looked uncomfortable, like the collar was strangling him. You clean up well, Eliza said. You too. He offered his arm. Ready for battle? As I'll ever be. The drive to town took an hour. Neither spoke much, but Caleb's hand rested on hers where it gripped his arm. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. Redemption's main street was crowded with wagons and people. The market stalls lined both sides, selling everything from vegetables to fabric to tools. Children ran between carts, women clustered in groups, men conducted business in doorways. Normal life, except for how the entire crowd seemed to freeze when Caleb's wagon appeared. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People turned to stare. The silence spread like a ripple across water. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down. He turned and offered his hand to Eliza. She took it, stepping down into the sudden hush. Smile, Caleb murmured, like you're happy to be here. Eliza smiled. It felt like a grimace, but she held it. They walked into the market together. People parted around them like they were diseased. Some stared openly, others turned away. A few women whispered behind their hands, harsh words barely muffled. Sarah appeared from a fabric stall, her face bright with forced cheer. Eliza, Caleb, I didn't know you were coming. Last-minute decision. Eliza embraced her friend, grateful for the buffer. How are the crowds? Busy. Good day for selling. Sarah's eyes flicked past them. You should see the new ribbons at Mrs. Chen's stall. Beautiful colors. They moved through the market slowly, stopping at stalls, making small purchases. Caleb stayed close, his hand at Eliza's back, proprietary but not possessive. They spoke to vendors who couldn't refuse service without being openly rude, bought apples from a farmer who looked terrified, examined fabric they didn't need, playing normal while everyone watched for cracks. Then Thomas Bradford appeared, blocking their path. He looked drunk, though it was barely noon. Well, well, the happy couple, his voice carried across the market. Tell me, Mrs. Vance, are you here of your own free will? Blink twice if you need help. Caleb tensed. Eliza felt his arm go rigid under her hand. I'm here because I want to be, Thomas. She kept her voice pleasant. Though I appreciate your concern. Concern, right. He stepped closer, whiskey breath hot on her face. You made a mistake, Eliza. You could have had comfort, security, a real future. Instead, you chose a man twice your age who's more interested in his cattle than… Caleb moved so fast Eliza barely saw it. One moment Thomas was talking, the next he was on the ground, Caleb standing over him, fists still clenched. The market erupted. Men rushed forward. Women screamed. Children scattered. Marcus appeared from nowhere, grabbing Caleb's arm. Boss, not here, not now. Caleb shook him off but didn't advance. Thomas scrambled to his feet, nose bleeding, eyes wild with humiliation and rage. You'll pay for that. Blood dripped down his chin. I'll see you hanged for assault. Then file your complaint. Caleb's voice was deadly quiet. But stay away from my wife. Mayor Hutchins pushed through the crowd, face red with anger or exertion or both. What in hell is going on here? He attacked me, Thomas pointed at Caleb. Unprovoked assault. I have witnesses. He was drunk and harassing Mrs. Vance. Marcus stood firm. I saw the whole thing. Man's got a right to defend his wife's honor. The crowd murmured, torn. Some nodded agreement. Others looked scandalized. Hutchins glanced between Caleb and Thomas, calculating which side served him better. I think you've made your position clear, Caleb. Hutchins gestured to two men nearby. Help Thomas to the doctor. Caleb, I'd suggest you and your wife leave before this escalates further. We're not done shopping. Eliza surprised herself by speaking. Every eye turned to her. We have as much right to be here as anyone. Mrs. Vance, Hutchins started, we'll finish our business and leave when we're ready. She looked directly at Thomas, at his bloody face and wounded pride. Unless someone else would like to question my free will? Silence. Then Sarah laughed, short and sharp, breaking the tension. Well said. Come on, Eliza. I'll show you those ribbons. They walked away, leaving the men to posture and threaten. But Eliza could feel the weight of every stare, the judgment thick as smoke. She'd drawn a line, taken a side, made herself a target. There was no going back now. They finished their shopping in tense silence, trailed by whispers and hostile glares. When they finally left town, Eliza's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't grip the wagon rail. Caleb had to lift her up bodily. They were a mile out when he finally spoke. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have hit him. He deserved it. Eliza watched the town disappear behind them. But you gave them exactly what they wanted. Evidence that you're violent, unstable. I know. His jaw worked. I saw him touch you, smelled the whiskey, heard what he was saying, and I just reacted. She understood. She'd wanted to hit Thomas herself. What happens now? Now they add assault to the list of charges, try to paint me as dangerous. He glanced at her. You should testify against me. Tell the judge I'm unstable, that you're afraid. They'll annul the marriage and you'll be free. Free to marry Thomas? Free to lose everything I own? She laughed bitterly. I don't want free. I want to win. This isn't a game, Eliza. I know. She met his eyes. But I'm done being invisible, done being pushed around. If they want to fight, they'll get one. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, respect, maybe both. You're tougher than you look. Had to be. Been on my own since I was 20. What happened when you were 20? The question surprised her. They'd never talked about their past beyond the bare necessities. My parents died. Cholera. I had no other family, no money, no prospects. So I learned to sew and I disappeared into places where no one asked questions. You've been running for 12 years. Until I married you. She looked at her hands, calloused from work. Now I'm standing still, and it terrifies me. Caleb was quiet for a long time. My wife, my first wife, her name was Anna. She was 19 when we married. I was 38. Everyone said I was robbing the cradle. Maybe I was. But she wanted adventure, wanted to build something from nothing. We had 4 good years before… He stopped, swallowed hard. Before the pregnancy went wrong, Eliza finished softly. The midwife said sometimes it just happens. Baby was breech, wouldn't turn. Anna fought for 18 hours before... His voice cracked. I held her while she died. Held my daughter too, for the 15 minutes she lived. Then I buried them both and swore I'd never go through that again. I'm sorry. So am I. He straightened, jaw tight. Point is, I know what it's like to lose everything, to have your future torn away. I won't let them do that to you. Or to you. Or to me. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but something had shifted between them. They weren't strangers anymore. They were allies, bound by necessity and growing understanding. The ranch appeared ahead, solid and real in the afternoon light. Home, for whatever that meant. Marcus met them in the yard, face grim. Lawyers here. Been waiting 2 hours. Samuel Blackwood turned out to be a compact man in his 50s, sharp-eyed and sharper dressed. He sat in Caleb's study with papers spread across every surface, looking like a general planning war. You're in trouble, he said without preamble when they entered, but not insurmountable trouble. That's encouraging, Caleb said dryly. I don't deal in encouragement. I deal in facts. Blackwood gestured them to chairs. Fact 1. The council wants your land. They've been trying to buy you out for years. This marriage gave them an opening. Fact 2. The territorial governor is neutral but politically cautious. He won't overturn a council decision without clear evidence of wrongdoing. Fact 3. You punched Thomas Bradford in front of 40 witnesses. That complicates things. He was harassing my wife. I don't care if he was setting her on fire. You gave them ammunition. Blackwood pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a case that this marriage is legitimate, consensual, and beneficial to both parties. We need documentation, witnesses, evidence of genuine partnership. How? Eliza asked. Financial records showing joint decisions, correspondence proving collaboration, witnesses testifying to mutual respect and cooperation. He looked at Eliza. And we need you to be unshakable on the stand. They'll try to break you, suggest you're being controlled or bribed. You have to convince a judge that you chose this freely and would choose it again. I can do that. Can you? Blackwood's eyes were hard, because they'll ask about your past, your finances, your relationships. They'll try to paint you as desperate or foolish or both. Can you sit there and defend your choices while they tear you apart? Eliza thought about 12 years of running, hiding, surviving, about standing in her shop while men tried to trap her, about climbing onto a wagon with a stranger and choosing the unknown over the certain. Yes, she said. I can do that. Blackwood studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good. Then we have a chance. They worked late into the night, going over documents, rehearsing questions, building their defense. Blackwood was thorough and merciless, poking holes in every answer until Eliza wanted to scream, but she held steady, refining her responses until they were bulletproof. Finally, near midnight, Blackwood packed his papers. I'll be back in 3 days. We'll run through this again. And again. Until you can answer in your sleep. After he left, Eliza sagged in her chair, exhausted. Caleb poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. You did well. I feel like I've been beaten. She sipped the whiskey, feeling it burn down her throat. Is this what the next 2 weeks will be like? Probably. He sat across from her, studying his glass. Blackwood's hard, but he's good. If anyone can get us through this, it's him. And if he can't? Caleb met her eyes. Then we lose everything. And they win. The whiskey sat heavy in her stomach. Outside, coyotes called across the valley, their voices sharp and lonesome. Eliza thought about winning and losing, about choices and consequences, about 2 people fighting against a system designed to crush them. I'm not sorry I married you, she said suddenly. Caleb looked up, surprise crossing his face. I'm scared, she continued, and angry, and terrified of what's coming, but I'm not sorry. She set down her glass. For the first time in 12 years, I'm fighting instead of running. Even if we lose, at least I fought. We're not going to lose. Caleb's voice was hard with determination. I didn't survive 46 years of this life just to let them take everything now. Then I guess we better win. I guess we better. They sat in the quiet study, two people bound by paper and desperation, and something else, something that might, given time and trust, become real. Outside, the wind picked up. Storm coming. Let it come. They had 10 days before the inquiry when the first fence went down. Marcus found it at dawn, a quarter-mile of wire cut clean, 50 head of cattle wandering onto neighboring property. Not broken by weather or accident, cut deliberately, the wire ends curled back like accusations. Caleb stood in the pre-dawn cold, examining the damage with a face carved from stone. Eliza had ridden out with him, unable to stay in the house while crisis unfolded. "How many are missing?" she asked. "Won't know until we round them up." Marcus spat into the dirt. "Could be none. Could be 20. Depends how fast they scattered and who found them first." "You think someone took them?" "I think someone wanted us distracted." Caleb walked the fence line, studying the ground. "There's boot prints here. 3 men, maybe 4. They knew what they were doing." The next day, a fire started in the hay barn. Billy caught it early, raised the alarm before it could spread. They lost 2 tons of winter feed but saved the structure. Pearl found the oil-soaked rags tucked behind a beam, insurance that this was no accident. The day after that, supplies they'd ordered from town arrived wrong. Salt instead of sugar, lamp oil contaminated with water, nails when they'd requested screws, small frustrations that added up to sabotage. Blackwood returned to chaos. He listened to Marcus's report, studied the cut fence wire, examined the burned rags, and nodded like he'd expected all of it. "They're escalating, trying to provoke you into retaliation." He looked at Caleb. "Do not take the bait. Every action you take from now until the inquiry will be scrutinized and twisted. You stay calm, document everything, and let me handle the legal response." "Legal response won't fix my fences or recover my cattle." "No, but it will keep you out of jail." Blackwood's voice was sharp. "They want you angry. Angry men make mistakes. Don't give them the satisfaction." Eliza watched Caleb's jaw work, watched him swallow rage and frustration. She understood the impulse. She wanted to ride into town herself, wanted to confront the men doing this, wanted to fight back with something more satisfying than paperwork. Instead, they documented. Photographed the fence, collected the rags, kept meticulous records of every incident, building a case. One small piece of evidence at a time. 3 days before the inquiry, Sarah arrived again, this time with her husband in tow. Robert Mitchell looked uncomfortable, hat in hand, but determined. "We want to testify," Sarah said without preamble. "For you, at the inquiry." Caleb looked surprised. "That'll make you targets." "We're already targets," Robert's voice was quiet but firm. "Council's been pressuring merchants to stop serving anyone associated with you. We're losing customers." But Sarah's right. What they're doing isn't justice, it's extortion. Blackwood appeared from the study, papers in hand. "You understand what you're offering? They'll come after your business, your reputation, maybe your property." "We understand." Sarah gripped her husband's hand. "But if good people don't stand up, the vultures win. We won't let that happen." 2 more families came forward that week. The Johnsons, who ran the feed store and had been dealing with Caleb for 15 years. And Mary Chen, the fabric merchant whose husband had died last year, leaving her vulnerable to the same ordinance that had targeted Eliza. "I'm next," Mary said flatly when Blackwood interviewed her. "Once they finish with you, they'll come for me. Better to fight now while I still can." Their testimonies were added to the growing pile of evidence. Blackwood drilled them all mercilessly, preparing them for cross-examination, teaching them how to answer without giving ammunition to the other side. Meanwhile, the ranch work continued. Cattle needed feeding, fences needed mending, life demanded attention even while everything else fell apart. Eliza threw herself into it, helping Pearl with increasingly elaborate meals, riding out with the hands to check fence lines, learning the rhythm of ranch life through sheer immersion. She was mucking stalls with Billy one afternoon when Caleb found her. "You don't have to do that." "I know." She kept working. "But sitting in the house makes me crazy. At least this is productive." He picked up a spare pitchfork and joined her. They worked in silence for a while, just the sound of hay and breathing and horses shifting in their stalls. "I talked to Blackwood about what happens if we lose," Caleb said finally. Eliza's hand stilled on the pitchfork. "And?" Best case, the marriage gets annulled. You walk away with whatever settlement we can negotiate. I probably face charges for assault and possibly coercion. Could mean jail time, could mean fines, depends on the judge. Worst case? They seize the ranch to cover legal fees and damages. You're sent back to redemption with nothing. I'm in jail and everything I built gets auctioned off to pay the council's friends. The pitchfork felt heavy in her hands. There has to be a middle ground. There is. We win. He met her eyes over the stall door. Blackwood thinks we have a shot. Good witnesses, solid documentation, and you're a convincing advocate for yourself. But it'll come down to the judge and how much pressure the council can apply. What aren't you telling me? He was quiet for a moment. The judge is Henry Morrison. He's territorial circuit based out of Denver. Reputation for being fair, but also for being practical. He won't overturn local governance without compelling reason. Meaning he'll side with the council unless we give him no choice. Exactly. Caleb set down his pitchfork, which means you need to be perfect on that stand. No hesitation, no doubt, nothing they can twist into evidence of coercion. I can do that. I know you can. Something in his voice made her look up. You're stronger than you think, Eliza. Stronger than they expect. That's our advantage. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel strong instead of terrified. But the inquiry loomed like a storm on the horizon, dark and inevitable. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the house settle, to Caleb moving around in the next room, to the wind rattling windows. The connecting door between their rooms sat locked as always, a barrier they'd maintained despite growing familiarity. She got up, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and went downstairs. Found Caleb in the study, surrounded by papers, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his elbow. "Can't sleep either?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up, and she saw exhaustion in every line of his face. "Keep thinking about everything that could go wrong." "That's a long list. Gets longer every time I review it." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Want to help me drink away the anxiety?" She sat and accepted the glass he poured. They drank in silence, the whiskey burning away some of the fear. "Tell me about Anna," Eliza said suddenly. "Your first wife. What was she like?" Caleb's expression shuddered. "Why?" "Because everyone in town thinks I'm trying to replace her. Because her ghost is in every room of this house. Because I want to know who I'm being compared to." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned back, staring at the ceiling. She was young, too young probably, full of ideas about adventure and romance. Thought ranch life would be exciting. He laughed without humor. Reality hit hard. She hated the isolation, hated the work, hated being alone while I was out managing cattle. We fought, a lot, about money, about the future, about whether to stay or sell and move to the city. "But you loved her." "I did. Despite the fighting, despite how wrong we were for each other, and when she got pregnant, she was happy for the first time in months, thought a baby would fix everything." His voice went rough. Instead, it killed her. Eliza set down her glass. "I'm not her." "I know. I won't break that easily. I know that too." He met her eyes. "That's why I chose you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Not love, not romance, but something else. Recognition, respect, partnership built on clear-eyed pragmatism. "We should sleep," Eliza said finally. "Long day tomorrow." Every day's long now. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Caleb, thank you for being honest." "Same to you." Upstairs she lay in bed staring at the connecting door, wondered what would happen if she unlocked it, what it would mean, whether either of them was ready for that complication. But she left it locked, and eventually exhaustion pulled her under. The morning of the inquiry dawned cold and clear. Eliza dressed in her best clothes, the blue wool dress again, but Pearl had helped her add new trim, making it look more expensive than it was. She pinned her hair up carefully, added the silver brooch, and studied herself in the mirror. She looked respectable, dignified, like a woman who made her own choices and stood by them. She hoped it was enough. Caleb waited downstairs in his suit, looking like he'd rather face a cattle stampede than a courtroom. Marcus and 3 other hands were coming as security, Blackwood's suggestion after the recent sabotage. Sarah and Robert would meet them there. The ride to town felt endless. They didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say. Everything had been rehearsed, prepared, documented. Now they just had to survive it. Redemption's courthouse was packed when they arrived. The whole town had turned out, along with people from surrounding areas, drawn by gossip and spectacle. They filed into the building through a gauntlet of stares and whispers. Inside, the courtroom was hot and airless, despite the cold outside. Judge Morrison sat at the bench, a lean man in his 60s with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. The council members occupied the front row on one side, their lawyer, a slick man named Porter from the territorial capital, arranging papers with theatrical precision. Blackwood guided them to their table. Remember what we practiced. Answer clearly, don't volunteer information, and stay calm no matter what they say. The judge called the room to order. His voice cut through the murmur like a blade. This inquiry concerns allegations of coercion regarding the marriage of Caleb Vance and Eliza Rowan Vance. Mr. Porter, you may present your case. Porter stood, smoothing his jacket. Your Honor, the Territorial Council has grave concerns about the circumstances surrounding this marriage. We have evidence suggesting that Mr. Vance used threats and intimidation to force Miss Rowan into marriage for the purpose of consolidating property and evading the Widow's Protection Ordinance. He laid out the council's case methodically. The speed of the courtship, the sudden marriage, Caleb's known reclusiveness, and Anna's tragic death, which Porter suggested left him unstable and desperate for female companionship. Thomas Bradford's testimony about being assaulted, anonymous witnesses claiming to have overheard threats. It was all circumstantial, all twisted, but presented with enough polish to sound convincing. Then Porter called his first witness, Margaret Thorne, the woman who'd married Councilman Wilson and then recanted. Margaret took the stand looking pale and frightened. Porter treated her gently, walking her through her story, how the council had pressured her to marry, how she'd felt trapped, how she'd cried through her wedding because she felt she had no choice. And do you believe Mrs. Vance felt similar pressure? Porter asked. Objection, Blackwood stood. Calls for speculation. Sustained, Porter smiled. Let me rephrase. Mrs. Thorne, did you observe Mrs. Vance before her marriage? Yes, in her shop. She looked scared, desperate. And after the marriage, when you saw her in town, she looked different, harder, like something in her had broken. Eliza's hands clenched under the table. That wasn't true. She'd looked different because she'd stopped hiding, stopped being invisible. But Margaret's testimony painted it as trauma. Blackwood cross-examined carefully. Mrs. Thorne, did you ever speak with Mrs. Vance about her feelings regarding her marriage? No. So your testimony about her emotional state is based entirely on your interpretation of her appearance? I suppose. And is it possible that a woman might look different after making a major life decision because she's adjusting to change rather than because she's been traumatized? Margaret hesitated. I guess. No further questions. Porter called Thomas Bradford next. Thomas had a bandage on his nose, milking the injury for sympathy. He described the market confrontation, making himself sound reasonable and Caleb sound violent. And why do you believe Mr. Vance attacked you? Porter asked. Because I questioned whether his wife was there willingly. He couldn't handle the truth being exposed. Or, Blackwood interjected during cross-examination, he reacted to you harassing his wife while intoxicated. Multiple witnesses reported smelling alcohol on your breath. Is that correct? Thomas's face reddened. I'd had a drink. That doesn't mean... It means your judgment was impaired and your behavior was inappropriate. Did you or did you not approach Mrs. Vance in a threatening manner? I was trying to help her. By suggesting she needed to be rescued? By implying she couldn't make her own decisions? Blackwood's voice was sharp. That sounds less like help and more like harassment. Thomas sputtered, but had no good answer. Blackwood dismissed him with visible contempt. The morning dragged on. More witnesses, more testimony, all designed to paint Caleb as controlling and Eliza as a victim. The heat in the courtroom became oppressive. Eliza's dress stuck to her back with sweat. Finally, the judge called a recess for lunch. They fled outside, gulping fresh air. They're making us look terrible, Eliza said. They're telling their version, Blackwood corrected. Now we tell ours. You're up after lunch. Her stomach dropped. Already? Better to get it over with. You're our strongest witness. Everything else builds from your testimony. She couldn't eat. Sat in the wagon while Caleb and Blackwood reviewed her answers one more time. Sarah brought her water and squeezed her hand. Just tell the truth, Sarah said. That's all you can do. The truth. The problem was, the truth was complicated. Yes, she'd been desperate. Yes, she'd married a stranger. Yes, it had been fast and unconventional, but it had also been her choice, and that mattered more than anything else. Court reconvened. The judge called Eliza to the stand. She walked through the crowded courtroom, feeling every eye on her, sat in the witness chair, placed her hand on the Bible for the oath, swearing to tell the truth, even though the truth was messy and imperfect. Blackwood approached first, his questions gentle and leading. Mrs. Vance, please tell the court how you came to marry Caleb Vance. She took a breath and began. Describe the counsel's visit to her shop, the ultimatum, the impossible choice between Thomas Bradford and losing everything, and then Caleb's offer. Why did you accept Mr. Vance's proposal? Because it was the only offer that came with respect. Her voice steadied as she spoke. The counsel wanted to trap me. Caleb offered me partnership. He made it clear I could refuse, that the choice was mine. That's why I said yes. Were you afraid of him? No, I was afraid of them. She gestured toward the council members. They wanted to control me, to turn me into property to be distributed among themselves. Caleb wanted a wife who was an equal partner. There's a difference. Has Mr. Vance ever threatened you, coerced you, or limited your freedom since your marriage? Never. I come and go as I please. I manage my own affairs. I've continued my seamstress work. He's given me half ownership of everything he owns, legally documented. If anything, I have more freedom now than I did when I was supposedly independent. Blackwood smiled. No further questions, Your Honor. Porter stood for cross-examination, and Eliza braced herself. Mrs. Vance, you claim this marriage is legitimate, yet you married a man you'd spoken to for less than 15 minutes. That seems rather impulsive, doesn't it? It was necessary. Necessary because you were desperate? Necessary because I was being cornered by men who thought they had the right to make my choices for me. So you admit you were desperate. I admit I was angry. There's a difference between desperation and determination. Porter's smile thinned. You're 32 years old, unmarried, with no family and limited income. Most women in your position would be grateful for any marriage offer. Instead, you rejected multiple legitimate proposals to marry a reclusive widower twice your age. Why? Because I'm not most women, and because the proposals you call legitimate came with strings attached, control over my property, my business, my life. Caleb's proposal came with partnership papers and legal ownership. I chose the option that treated me like a person instead of a possession. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Porter's jaw tightened. Let's discuss your husband's temperament. He attacked Thomas Bradford in public. Does that concern you? He defended me from harassment. I'd call that protective, not violent. Protective or possessive? Protective. I know the difference. I've dealt with possessive men. She looked directly at Thomas in the gallery. They're the ones who think women owe them something just for existing. Porter switched tactics. Isn't it true that you had nowhere else to go? That marriage was your only option to avoid destitution? Marriage was one option. I could have left town, started over somewhere else. I chose to stay and fight instead. By marrying a wealthy man who could protect you. By marrying a man who offered me partnership instead of ownership. Eliza leaned forward. You keep trying to make this about desperation or coercion, but the truth is simpler. I made a choice. Maybe it was unconventional. Maybe it was fast. Maybe it wasn't what everyone expected. But it was mine, and I'd make it again. Porter asked more questions, trying to find cracks in her testimony. But Eliza held firm, answering each question with the same clear conviction. Yes, the marriage was sudden. Yes, she barely knew Caleb. But yes, it was her choice, made freely and without regret. Finally, Porter dismissed her. She returned to her seat on shaking legs, Caleb's hand briefly squeezing hers under the table. You did well, Blackwood murmured. The afternoon brought their witnesses. Sarah and Robert testified about seeing Eliza before and after the marriage, about her demeanor and choices. Mary Chen spoke about the widow's ordinance and its real purpose, control and consolidation of power. The Johnsons described their business dealings with Caleb over the years, painting him as fair and honorable. Each testimony chipped away at the council's narrative, building a counterstory of partnership and mutual respect. Then Caleb took the stand. Porter attacked immediately, bringing up Anna's death, suggesting Caleb was unstable and grief-stricken, desperate for female companionship. "Is it true your first wife died in childbirth?" "Yes." "And you've been alone for 8 years since?" "Yes." "That must have been very difficult, lonely even." "It was." Caleb's voice was flat, emotionless. "But loneliness isn't a crime." "No, but it might drive a man to make rash decisions. Like marrying a stranger." "I didn't marry a stranger. I married a woman I'd observed over years who I knew to be hardworking, independent, and honest. I proposed a partnership based on mutual benefit. She accepted. Nothing rash about it." "You're twice her age." "I'm aware of basic mathematics." Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Porter's face reddened. "Mr. Vance, you assaulted Thomas Bradford in front of witnesses. How do you justify that?" "I don't justify it, I did it anyway." Caleb met Porter's eyes steadily. "He was drunk and harassing my wife. I reacted poorly. I shouldn't have hit him, but I won't apologize for defending her." "Even though your violence proves the council's point about your instability?" "My violence proves I'm human, imperfect, capable of anger when someone I care about is threatened." He paused. "But it doesn't prove coercion. My wife isn't afraid of me. Ask her." Porter tried several more approaches, but Caleb remained steady, admitting his flaws while defending his choices. When Blackwood cross-examined, he brought out the documentation: property transfers, partnership agreements, financial records showing Eliza's equal ownership of everything. "Mr. Vance, if this marriage were annulled today, what would Mrs. Vance walk away with?" "Half of everything I own. The ranch, the cattle, the accounts. It's all legally documented." "And if she chose to leave you tomorrow?" "Same thing. She'd keep her half. That was our agreement from the beginning." "That doesn't sound like coercion to me, Your Honor." Blackwood returned to his seat. The day ended with closing arguments. Porter painted a picture of vulnerable women preyed upon by desperate men, of the need for protective ordinances and council oversight. Blackwood countered with evidence of actual coercion, by the council, not by Caleb, and defended the right of adults to make their own choices. Judge Morrison listened to everything with an expression that revealed nothing. "I'll take this under advisement," he said finally. "The court will reconvene tomorrow morning for my decision." They filed out into the evening cold. Eliza felt wrung out, exhausted, her voice raw from hours of testimony. "How did we do?" she asked Blackwood. "Better than expected. Your testimony was strong. Caleb's was honest. The witnesses backed up the core narrative." He packed his papers. "But Morrison's hard to read. Could go either way." They stayed in town that night, unable to face the long drive home. Sarah offered them her spare room, and they accepted gratefully. Robert made dinner while Sarah fussed over them, trying to distract from the tension. Eliza picked at her food, unable to eat. Everything hung in the balance now. Their future, their partnership, everything they'd built in 3 short weeks. "Whatever happens," Caleb said quietly while the Mitchells cleared dishes, "you fought well. You should be proud." "I will be, if we win. Even if we don't." He met her eyes. "You stood up for yourself. That matters." That night, in the Mitchells' spare room, Eliza lay awake listening to Caleb breathing in the cot across from her. They'd never shared a room before, and the intimacy of it felt strange and comforting at once. "Are you awake?" she whispered. "Yeah." "What are you thinking about?" "Tomorrow, and how much I want to burn down that courthouse." She laughed softly. "That would definitely prove their point about you being unstable. Worth it, though." They were quiet for a moment. Then Caleb spoke again. "Eliza, thank you." "For what?" "For choosing me, for standing beside me, for being stronger than anyone expected." He paused. "I know this isn't what you imagined for your life, but I'm grateful you're here." Her throat tightened. "I'm grateful too. Even scared out of my mind, I'm grateful." Get some sleep. We'll need our strength tomorrow. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay in the dark, listening to the town settle around them, and wondered what morning would bring, vindication or destruction, freedom or ruin. Either way, they'd face it together. That was something, at least. Morning came too fast and not fast enough. Eliza woke to gray light filtering through unfamiliar curtains, her body stiff from a night spent mostly awake. Across the room, Caleb's cot was already empty, blankets folded with military precision. She could hear voices downstairs, low, tense, the sound of people trying not to show their fear. She dressed quickly, hands fumbling with buttons. Her reflection in the small mirror looked pale, dark circles under her eyes, testament to sleepless hours. She pinched her cheeks for color, pinned her hair up, and went downstairs. Caleb stood by the window, coffee cup in hand, staring out at the street. He'd shaved, put on his suit, but the tension in his shoulders was visible even from across the room. "Morning," she said quietly. He turned. "Sleep at all?" "A little. You?" "Not much." He gestured to the pot on the stove. "Coffee's fresh. Sarah made breakfast, but I can't eat." "Me neither." But she poured coffee anyway, needing something to do with her hands. They stood together in the Mitchells' kitchen, two people waiting for their fate to be decided by a stranger. Sarah appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day. "Court starts at 9. Blackwood sent word he'll meet us there at 8:30 to go over anything last minute." "There's nothing left to go over," Caleb said. "We either did enough or we didn't." The walk to the courthouse felt like a death march. The whole town was already gathering, more people than yesterday, if that was possible. News had spread to neighboring counties. Everyone wanted to see how this ended. Blackwood waited on the courthouse steps, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. He pulled them aside, speaking low and fast. "Morrison sent word to his clerk last night. He's made his decision. Whatever he says in there is final. No appeals at this level. So we take it clean and figure out next steps after." "You think we lost?" Eliza said. Not a question. "I think Morrison's practical, and the practical move is siding with established authority." Blackwood's jaw was tight. "But I've been wrong before. So we go in there with our heads high and we take whatever comes." The courtroom was packed to capacity, people standing in the back when the seats filled. The air was thick with body heat and anticipation. Eliza took her seat at their table, Caleb beside her, and felt the weight of every stare, every whispered speculation. The council members sat across the aisle looking confident. Bradford Sr. actually smiled. Thomas smirked behind his bandage. They thought they'd won. Maybe they had. Judge Morrison entered at 9 exactly. The room fell silent. He settled into his chair, arranged his papers, and surveyed the courtroom with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I've reviewed all testimony and evidence presented in this inquiry," he began, his voice carrying to every corner. "This case concerns allegations of coercion in the marriage of Caleb Vance and Eliza Vance. The council claims Mr. Vance used threats and intimidation to force Miss Rowan into marriage. Mr. Vance and his wife claim the marriage was entered into freely and represents a legitimate partnership." He paused, shuffling papers. Eliza's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The evidence presented by the council is largely circumstantial. Anonymous witnesses who cannot be cross-examined, speculation about Mr. Vance's mental state based on past tragedy, testimony from individuals with clear bias and motive to see this marriage dissolved. Morrison's tone was dry, academic. The assault on Mr. Thomas Bradford, while regrettable, appears to have been provoked by inappropriate behavior while intoxicated. Not commendable, but not evidence of a pattern of violence or coercion. Eliza felt Caleb's hand find hers under the table. She gripped it hard. Conversely, the evidence presented by the defense is substantial and well documented. Financial records showing genuine partnership and equal ownership. Witness testimony describing Mrs. Vance as capable and self-directed both before and after the marriage. And most compellingly, Mrs. Vance's own testimony, which I found credible and consistent. Morrison looked directly at Eliza. "Mrs. Vance, you impressed this court with your clarity and conviction. You admit the marriage was unconventional and rapid, but you articulated clear reasons for your choice and demonstrated no signs of coercion or fear. Your understanding of the legal arrangements shows sophisticated awareness of your rights and interests." He turned to the council members. "However, I am troubled by what this inquiry has revealed about the so-called Widows Protection Ordinance. The evidence suggests this ordinance is being used not to protect vulnerable women, but to control and redistribute property through forced marriages. Several witnesses testified to pressure and coercion from council members themselves. Mrs. Thorne's testimony, in particular, suggests her own marriage may warrant investigation. Bradford Sr.'s smile vanished. Hutchins shifted in his seat. That said, this court's jurisdiction is limited to the specific question before it. Was Eliza Rowan coerced into marriage with Caleb Vance? Morrison straightened his papers. Based on the evidence presented, I find no credible proof of coercion. Mrs. Vance made an informed choice, however unconventional, and entered into a legal partnership that appears to benefit both parties. The courtroom erupted. Eliza couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she'd just heard. Morrison banged his gavel. Order! I'm not finished! The noise died down. He continued, voice hard. The marriage of Caleb and Eliza Vance is declared valid and legitimate. The allegations of coercion are dismissed. Furthermore, I am recommending to the territorial governor that the Widows Protection Ordinance be reviewed for constitutional compliance. Any ordinance that compels marriage under threat of property seizure is legally questionable at best. He looked at the council members. Gentlemen, I suggest you revisit your policies before the territorial government does it for you. This inquiry is concluded. Court dismissed. The gavel came down with finality. For a moment, Eliza couldn't move. Then Caleb was pulling her to her feet. Blackwood was shaking their hands. Sarah was crying and hugging her. The noise of the courtroom swelled around them. Outrage from the council, cheers from their supporters, chaos everywhere. We won, Eliza said, testing the words. We actually won. You won. Caleb's grip on her hand was almost painful. Your testimony did it. Morrison believed you. Blackwood was already gathering papers, all business despite the victory. We need to leave before they regroup. They'll be looking for ways to retaliate, and I'd rather not give them opportunities. But as they pushed toward the exit, Bradford Sr. blocked their path. His face was purple with rage. This isn't over, he snarled. You think one judge's opinion changes anything? We run this town. We'll make your lives hell. You already tried that. Caleb's voice was cold. It didn't work. You got lucky. That's all. Lucky and temporary. Bradford leaned in close. That ranch of yours, a lot of things can go wrong on a spread that big. Accidents happen. Animals die. Buildings burn. Is that a threat? Blackwood stepped between them. Because making threats in a courthouse after losing a case seems particularly stupid, even for you. It's not a threat. It's a promise. Bradford turned to Eliza. You made the wrong choice, girl. You'll regret it before long. Marcus and the ranch hands materialized from the crowd, forming a protective barrier. Boss, we should go. They made their way out of the courthouse into morning sunlight. The crowd followed, some congratulating them, others hurling insults. Eliza kept her head high, kept moving, didn't let them see her shake. They reached the wagon. Marcus and the hands formed up around it, ready to escort them home. But before they could leave, Mary Chen pushed through the crowd. Mrs. Vance, so she was breathless, clutching a wrapped package. I wanted to thank you. What you did, standing up to them, it gives the rest of us hope. I just told the truth. You did more than that. You showed us we don't have to accept what they decide for us. Mary pressed the package into Eliza's hands. This is fabric, the good silk you admired in my shop for your next dress. You've earned something beautiful. Eliza's throat tightened. Thank you. More women approached, one by one. Quiet words of support, small gifts, promises to stop by the ranch. Women who'd been too afraid to speak up during the inquiry, but who found courage now that the immediate danger had passed. Not all of them. Some stood with the council members, faces tight with disapproval. But enough. Enough to matter. Finally, they left redemption behind, the wagon rattling over familiar roads toward home. Eliza sat beside Caleb, the package of silk in her lap, and tried to process what had just happened. They meant what they said, she said finally. About making our lives hell. I know. Caleb's jaw was set. We'll deal with it. How? You heard Bradford. They're going to sabotage the ranch, hurt the business, do whatever they can to punish us. Then we protect what's ours and we build something they can't destroy." He glanced at her. "We didn't win just for ourselves today. We won for every woman they've been trying to trap. That matters more than whatever petty revenge they plan." Marcus rode up alongside the wagon. "Boss, want me to post extra guards tonight in case they try something? Double the watch and send word to the neighbors. Anyone sees strangers on our property, they let us know immediately." The ranch appeared ahead, and Eliza felt something loosen in her chest. Home. Whatever else happened, they still had this. Pearl met them in the yard, her usual stern expression cracking into something almost like a smile. "Heard you won. About damn time someone put those vultures in their place." "We won the inquiry," Caleb corrected. "The real fight's just starting. Then we better get ready for it." Pearl headed back inside. "I'll make extra dinner. You'll need your strength." The hands gathered around, wanting details. Caleb gave them a brief version while Marcus organized security rotations. Eliza slipped into the house, suddenly exhausted. She made it to the parlor before her legs gave out, sat on the sofa and stared at nothing, feeling the adrenaline drain away, leaving only bone-deep weariness. Caleb found her there an hour later. He changed out of his suit, back in ranch clothes, but the tension hadn't left his shoulders. "You all right?" "I don't know." She looked at her hands, still trembling slightly. "We won, but it doesn't feel finished." "It's not." He sat beside her, leaving careful space between them. "Bradford wasn't bluffing. They're going to come at us hard." "How hard?" "Hard enough to try to break us." He was quiet for a moment. "The question is whether we can survive what they throw at us long enough for the territorial review to happen. If Morrison's recommendation gets traction, the ordinance dies, and the council loses their primary tool for control. They know that, which means they have a limited window to destroy us before they lose power. So they'll use it. Every bit of it." Caleb stood, paced to the window. "I've been thinking. We need to move some assets off the ranch. Diversify in case they manage to seize property through legal challenges. And we need allies, other ranchers, merchants in neighboring towns, anyone with reason to oppose the council's overreach. You're talking about building a coalition. I'm talking about survival. And maybe more than that." He turned to face her. "What happened today? That judge questioning the ordinance, those women thanking you, that's the beginning of something bigger than just us. If we push it, we could actually change things. Break the council's power for good." Eliza studied him, seeing the calculation in his eyes, the strategic mind that had built this ranch from nothing. "You've been planning this." "Since the day they filed their complaint. I knew if we won, we'd have momentum. A chance to shift the power structure." He smiled without humor. "I'm not a good man, Eliza. I'm ambitious and I hold grudges, but I'm also practical. And practically speaking, the best defense is making sure they never have the power to attack us again. That's not being bad. That's being smart. It's being ruthless. There's a difference." He moved back to the sofa, sat closer this time. "I need to know if you're willing to take this further, because if we go after them, really go after them, it'll get uglier than what we just went through. They'll attack everything. Our reputation, our business, maybe our lives." Eliza thought about the women who'd thanked her, about Margaret Thorne crying through her forced wedding, about 12 years of being invisible because visibility meant vulnerability. "I'm tired of being afraid," she said finally. "Tired of letting men like Bradford decide who gets power and who gets crushed. If we have a chance to actually change that, we have to take it. Even if it destroys us? Even then." She met his eyes. "Because at least we'll have tried." Something shifted in his expression, respect maybe, or recognition. "All right then, we fight." They spent the evening planning. Blackwood arrived with a list of potential allies, ranchers and merchants who'd suffered under the council's policies. They drafted letters, made lists, strategized about how to build support for the territorial review. "The governor's office is already interested after Morrison's recommendation," Blackwood explained, "but they need evidence of systematic abuse, testimonies from multiple victims, documentation of coercion, and property seizures." "We can get that," Eliza said. "Those women today, they'll talk if they know someone's listening. Getting them to talk officially is different from private thanks." Blackwood tapped his pen against the table. "They'll face retaliation. We need to offer protection. Then we offer it. Caleb leaned back. Any woman willing to testify can come stay at the ranch. We've got room, and we've got enough hands to provide security. You're talking about harboring witnesses against the Territorial Council. That's bold. It's necessary. Caleb's voice was hard. They started this war. We're just fighting back with their own weapons. Legal pressure, public opinion, and a refusal to back down. Over the next week, women came. Not all of them, but enough. Margaret Thorne arrived first, shamefaced but determined. Then 3 others who'd been threatened with the ordinance but hadn't yet married. 2 widows who'd lost property to council members under suspicious circumstances. They filled the ranch's extra rooms, turning the big empty house into something alive. Pearl complained about the extra work but threw herself into managing the household. The hands adjusted to female presence with varying degrees of awkwardness. And Eliza found herself at the center of it all, organizing, mediating, collecting stories that made her blood boil. He told me if I didn't accept his son's proposal, he'd have my bakery condemned for health violations, one woman said, voice shaking. Made-up violations. I've run that shop for 20 years without a single complaint. They took my husband's land after he died. Another testified, anger overriding fear. Said I couldn't manage it alone. Sold it to Bradford's cousin for a quarter of its value. When I objected, they threatened to have me declared mentally unfit. Story after story, each one a variation on the same theme. Powerful men using law and intimidation to control women's lives and seize their property. Blackwood documented everything, building a case that grew stronger with each testimony. He sent weekly reports to the territorial governor's office, keeping pressure on the review, but the council fought back. 2 nights after Margaret moved in, someone shot at the ranch house. The bullet shattered a window, missing Caleb by inches. No one was hurt, but the message was clear. Marcus doubled security again. The hands took shifts patrolling at night, armed and alert. The women stayed inside after dark. The ranch became a fortress. Then supplies stopped arriving from town altogether. The merchants who'd supported them received threats. The Johnsons' feed store was vandalized. Sarah's bakery lost half its customers overnight. They're trying to isolate us, Blackwood observed during one of his visits. Cut off supplies, destroy your support network, make you too expensive to maintain. Won't work. Caleb showed him the correspondence he'd been maintaining with ranchers from neighboring counties. We've got suppliers in 3 other towns now. More expensive to transport, but sustainable. And the neighbors have started coordinating. If one of us gets hit with sabotage, the others provide backup. You're building an alliance. I'm building an army. Caleb's smile was sharp. They wanted war. I'm giving them one. But the cost kept mounting. 3 horses disappeared one night, presumed stolen. A section of fence was cut weekly now, requiring constant repair. Cattle drifted onto neighboring property and had to be retrieved, small wounds that bled them slowly. Eliza watched their funds drain away in security costs and supply premiums. Watched Caleb work 18-hour days managing the ranch while fighting a political battle. Watched the women in their care struggle with fear and determination in equal measure. And she kept organizing. Coordinated testimony collection. Wrote letters to newspapers detailing the council's abuses. Reached out to women's organizations in Denver and beyond. Used every skill she'd learned from 12 years of survival to build something bigger than herself. 1 month after the inquiry, the territorial governor's office announced a formal investigation into the Widows' Protection Ordinance and the council's administration of it. The announcement came via telegram. Blackwood read it aloud in the study, his voice carefully controlled but his eyes bright with satisfaction. Investigation to begin within 30 days. Full audit of council proceedings, property transfers, and marriage records for the past 5 years. During investigation, all enforcement of the Widows' Ordinance is suspended. The women in the parlor erupted in cheers. Eliza felt tears sting her eyes, but blinked them back. It wasn't over yet. They'll fight this, she said. Of course they will. Blackwood folded the telegram carefully. But they're fighting from a defensive position now. We changed the game. That night, Eliza found Caleb on the porch, staring out at the dark valley. She brought him coffee and stood beside him. We did it, she said quietly. We started it. Still a long way to go. I know. She sipped her coffee, feeling the cold night air on her face. Caleb? Thank you. He looked at her, surprise crossing his features. For what? For giving me a chance to fight. For standing with me when you could have just let me drown. She paused. For being a better partner than I expected. Same to you. His voice was rough. When I proposed, I thought I was getting a competent manager and an end to social pressure. I didn't expect a strategist and a revolutionary. She laughed softly. I didn't expect to become one. They stood in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the clearing sky. Somewhere in the valley, cattle lowed. In the house behind them, women's voices drifted through open windows. Laughter, conversation, the sound of people feeling safe. The investigation will take months, Caleb said eventually. Maybe longer. And even if they shut down the ordinance, the council won't go quietly. We're looking at years of legal battles, probably more sabotage, definitely more threats. I know. And I can't promise we'll win all of it. Can't promise the ranch will survive, or that our reputation will recover, or that any of this will end well. I know that too. She turned to face him. But I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together. He studied her face in the dim light from the windows. When did you stop being afraid? I didn't. I'm terrified every day. She smiled. But I'm also angry. And determination beats fear most of the time. Most of the time? The rest of the time, I fake it. He laughed, a real laugh, and Eliza realized it was the first time she'd heard that sound from him. It transformed his face, made him look years younger. You're something else, Eliza Vance. So are you, Caleb Vance. They went inside together as the temperature dropped. The house was warm and full of life now, so different from the empty museum it had been when she'd first arrived. Women occupied the parlor, mending and talking. Pearl sang in the kitchen while preparing tomorrow's bread. Even the connecting door between their bedrooms had been left unlocked for weeks, though neither had crossed that threshold yet. Some boundaries took longer to navigate than others. Eliza prepared for bed in her room, changed into her nightgown, brushed out her hair. Through the connecting door, she could hear Caleb moving around. The routine had become familiar, comforting even. She was about to extinguish her lamp when she heard it, the sound of horses, many of them, approaching fast. Marcus's shout cut through the night. Riders coming in! Everyone inside! Eliza ran to the window and saw torches in the distance, at least a dozen of them, moving toward the ranch. Her stomach dropped. Caleb burst through the connecting door, already dressed, rifle in hand. Get the women to the cellar. Now! What's happening? Bradford's making his move. Go! She didn't argue, just ran. Gathered the women from the parlor, herded them toward the kitchen where Pearl was already opening the cellar door. Margaret's face was white with terror. The others looked equally frightened but moved quickly. What about you? Pearl demanded as Eliza pushed the last woman toward the stairs. I'm staying up here. Someone needs to witness whatever they do. That's insane. It's necessary. Get down there and bar the door from inside. Don't open it until we give the all clear. She didn't wait for Pearl's response, just ran back to the front of the house. Through the windows, she could see the riders pulling up in the yard, men on horseback carrying torches, some wearing masks. 20 of them, maybe more. Bradford Sr. sat at the front on a large roan, his face visible in the torchlight. No mask for him. He wanted them to know exactly who was attacking. Marcus and the ranch hands had formed a defensive line between the riders and the house, rifles ready. Caleb stood at the center, his weapon trained on Bradford. You're trespassing, Caleb called out. Leave now or face the consequences. The only one facing consequences is you, Vance. Bradford's voice carried across the yard. You've pushed too far, brought shame on this town, harbored women against their families' wishes, spread lies to the territorial government. Tonight that ends. Those women are here of their own free will, and the only lies being told are the ones you're trying to protect. Last chance. Send out the women and surrender yourself for arrest. We'll take it from there. On what charges? Kidnapping, corruption, conspiracy against the territorial council. Bradford smiled. We've got warrants, signed by the county sheriff. The sheriff's your cousin. Those warrants aren't worth the paper they're printed on. They're worth enough. Bradford gestured to his men. Take him. The riders surged forward. Marcus and the hands opened fire, aiming high, warning shots that cracked through the night. The riders scattered, horses rearing. "Next volley's not a warning," Marcus shouted. Bradford's men returned fire. Bullets slammed into the house, shattering windows. Eliza dropped to the floor, heart racing. This was madness. This was war. Caleb fired back, and one of the riders went down clutching his shoulder. The others retreated to regroup, circling like wolves. "You want a siege, Vance? We can do that." Bradford was breathing hard, face red in the torchlight. "We can sit out here until you starve or burn you out. Your choice. Or the territorial marshal can arrive and arrest you all for armed assault." The voice came from the road, sharp with authority. Everyone turned. A new group of riders approached, these wearing official badges. The territorial marshal sat at the front, flanked by 6 deputies, all armed and looking grim. "Marshal Pike." Bradford's voice lost some of its confidence. "This is a local matter. This is 20 armed men attacking a private residence. That's territorial jurisdiction, Bradford." Pike rode into the yard, his horse stepping carefully around the scattered riders. "I'm placing you and your men under arrest for armed assault, attempted arson, and a dozen other charges I'll think of on the ride back to town." "You can't. We have warrants. Fraudulent warrants aren't worth anything. And even if they were legitimate, you don't serve them with a lynch mob." Pike gestured to his deputies. "Disarm them. Any who resist get an extra charge." The deputies moved in. Bradford's men, faced with actual law enforcement, lowered their weapons. Some tried to flee but were quickly rounded up. Within minutes, they were all disarmed and restrained. Bradford himself sat on his horse, face purple with rage. "This isn't over. When the governor hears, the governor sent me." Pike's voice was cold. "He's been monitoring this situation since Judge Morrison's recommendation. Your little raid tonight just confirmed everything we suspected about council corruption. Congratulations, Bradford. You've guaranteed the investigation will be thorough." He turned to Caleb. "Anyone hurt?" "One of his men took a shoulder wound, none of mine." "Lucky. Though shooting in self-defense on your own property is legal." Pike surveyed the yard. "We'll need statements from everyone here, and I'll need to speak with the women you're sheltering." "They're in the cellar. I'll get them." Eliza stood on shaking legs and made her way to the kitchen. Her hands trembled as she unbarred the cellar door. "It's safe. The marshal's here. They arrested Bradford and his men." The women emerged slowly, Pearl bringing up the rear. They stared at the scene in the yard, armed deputies, Bradford and his men in custody, the aftermath of violence. "Is this real?" Margaret whispered. "Did they really come to arrest them?" "It's real." Eliza's voice was steadier than she felt. "We won. Again." The rest of the night passed in a blur of statements and questions. Pike interviewed everyone, took detailed notes, documented the damage. He was thorough and professional, treating the women with respect, and their testimonies as credible. As dawn broke, he finally prepared to leave, his prisoners secured in a wagon for transport to the territorial capital. "You made a lot of enemies doing this," he told Caleb and Eliza as they stood together on the porch. "But you also made allies. The governor's office is taking this seriously. The investigation will be comprehensive. And after tonight, the council's going to have a hard time claiming they're innocent victims of slander." "What happens to Bradford?" Eliza asked. "Trial. Probably imprisonment if convicted, which he will be. We've got 24 witnesses." Pike adjusted his hat. "His property will likely be seized to cover damages and legal fees. The council will be dissolved and restructured. Redemption's getting a new government whether it wants one or not." After he left, Eliza and Caleb stood in the wreckage of their yard. Bullet holes scarred the house. Broken glass littered the porch. Horses had torn up the ground. Evidence of violence everywhere. But they'd survived. They'd won. "You all right?" Caleb asked. "No." Eliza's voice shook. "I thought they were going to kill us. Thought I'd watch them burn everything down." "They tried." He put his arm around her shoulders, the first real embrace they'd shared. "But we're still standing." She leaned into him, letting herself feel the fear she'd been suppressing all night. His heartbeat was steady under her ear. Real, alive, safe. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild, fix the house, repair the fences, get back to normal." He paused. "And we wait for the investigation to finish. See what kind of world we've built. Together. Together." The sun rose over the valley, painting everything gold. Somewhere in town, the wheels of justice were turning. The council's power was broken. The ordinance was suspended. Women were free. They'd paid for it in blood and fear and sleepless nights. But they'd paid willingly, and they'd won something worth having. Eliza stood in her husband's embrace and watched the dawn come up over land that was half hers, surrounded by women she'd helped free, and felt something she hadn't felt in 12 years. Hope. The investigation took 4 months, and they were the longest months of Eliza's life. The women who'd sought refuge at the ranch began trickling back to their own lives as fear loosened its grip on the town. Margaret was the last to leave, standing in the yard with her small bag, looking uncertain. "You sure you'll be all right?" Eliza asked. "I bought back my bakery, used money from the restitution fund." Margaret's smile was tentative but real. "It won't be easy, but it's mine. Really mine this time. If you need anything, I know where to find you." Margaret embraced her quickly. "Thank you, Eliza, for showing us we could fight back." After she left, the house felt empty again. But it was a different kind of empty than before. Not a mausoleum to grief, but a space waiting to be filled with new life. Eliza threw herself into restoration. The bullet holes were patched, the windows replaced, the yard cleared of debris. She expanded her sewing business, taking orders from 3 counties now. Women came to her not just for mending, but for new dresses, wedding gowns, christening outfits. Her waiting list stretched 6 months out. Caleb rebuilt the burned section of the hay barn, reinforced the fences, expanded the cattle operation. The ranch had taken a financial hit from the sabotage, but neighboring ranchers helped with loans and labor. The alliance he'd built during the crisis held firm, transforming into something more permanent, a cooperative that shared resources and protected each other from future exploitation. They worked side by side through long days, eating Pearl's cooking in exhausted silence at night, falling into bed too tired for anything but sleep. The connecting door stayed unlocked, but neither crossed it. Some transitions took time. Word from the territorial capital came in pieces. Bradford Sr. was convicted of armed assault and conspiracy. Sentenced to 8 years in prison, his property seized. Thomas fled west, rumor said California, running from his father's disgrace and his own cowardice. Mayor Hutchins resigned in disgrace. The other council members faced lesser charges but lost their positions. The Widows' Protection Ordinance was declared unconstitutional and struck from the books. Women across the territory celebrated. Sarah sent Eliza a letter describing the party they'd thrown in redemption. Margaret's bakery filled with women drinking wine and dancing, free at last from the threat of forced marriage. But freedom came with complications. The new territorial administrator arrived in redemption to rebuild the local government. His name was Silas Crane, and he was efficient, fair, and utterly unsympathetic to the old power structure. He held town meetings, solicited opinions, and began drafting new ordinances that protected property rights regardless of gender or marital status. He also invited Eliza to join the new advisory council. She read his letter 3 times, sitting at the kitchen table while Pearl kneaded bread and Caleb reviewed account books. "He wants me to help govern redemption." Caleb looked up. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing yet. I don't know what to say." She set down the letter. 2 months ago they tried to burn us out. Now they want me making policy decisions? Not they. Him. Crane's territorial appointment, not local. He's probably looking for people who won't be loyal to the old corruption. Caleb returned to his books. "It's your choice, but you'd be good at it." "I don't know anything about government." "You organized a resistance movement and coordinated testimony from 24 witnesses while under siege. That's politics." He glanced at her. "Question is whether you want to spend your time that way. Advisory council means trips to town, meetings, dealing with the same people who tried to destroy us." "They're not all the same people. Most of the worst ones are gone." Eliza tapped the letter thoughtfully. "And maybe that's exactly why I should do it. Make sure the new system doesn't just replicate the old one with different faces." "Then tell Crane yes." She did, and found herself improbably helping to rebuild the town that had once tried to erase her. The first advisory council meeting was tense. Half the attendees still blamed her for Bradford's downfall, never mind that Bradford had brought it on himself. But Crane ran a tight meeting, focused on practical matters: infrastructure repairs, business licensing, property dispute resolution. Eliza kept her contributions measured, picking her battles. When they discussed the new marriage registration requirements, She pushed for language that explicitly protected women's property rights. When they debated business permits, she argued for lower fees that wouldn't price out small operators. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Sarah cornered her after the meeting, face bright with approval. "You were brilliant in there. Henderson looked like he was going to have a heart attack when you shot down his proposal to require male co-signers on business loans. It was a stupid proposal. It was a standard proposal. You made it stupid by pointing out how it violated the new territorial protections." Sarah linked arms with her. "Have dinner with us tonight. Robert wants to talk about expanding our business and could use your perspective." Over dinner at the Mitchells, they discussed plans for a new bakery location and possibly a small restaurant. The conversation was easy, familiar, and Eliza realized she'd stopped looking over her shoulder for threats. Redemption was changing, slowly but genuinely. Walking back to where Caleb waited with the wagon, she felt something shift inside her. This town wasn't her enemy anymore. It was just a place, full of complicated people trying to figure out how to live together, and she was part of that now, not hiding in the margins, but actively shaping the outcome. "Good meeting?" Caleb asked as she climbed up beside him. "Productive. Crane's serious about reform." She settled into the seat. "I think we're actually going to pull this off." "Building a better town?" "Building something worth having." They rode home under stars, the valley spread out dark and peaceful around them. Summer was fading into autumn, the air taking on that crisp quality that promised winter. The ranch would be busy soon with preparations for the cold months ahead. But that night, sitting in the study while Caleb reviewed correspondence and Eliza worked on a dress commission, something felt different. Less like two strangers sharing space, more like partners who'd chosen each other and kept choosing each other through everything that followed. "Caleb?" She set down her sewing. "Do you regret it? Marrying me, I mean. Everything that came after?" He looked up from his papers, considering the question seriously. "Some days, when I'm dealing with the financial damage or the still hostile merchants, or the fact that half the territory thinks I'm either a hero or a villain." He paused. "But then I remember what my life was like before. Empty house. No purpose beyond making money, slowly calcifying into a bitter old man. And I think even if we'd lost everything, it would have been worth it to feel alive again." "That's not really an answer." "It's the only honest one I have." He set down his pen. "Do you regret it?" Eliza thought about the terror of those first weeks, the inquiry, the siege, the constant fear. Thought about standing invisible in her shop, watching her future narrow to nothing. Thought about who she'd been and who she'd become. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it, even the awful parts, because I'm not invisible anymore." "You were never invisible, just hiding." "Maybe, but I'm not hiding now." He smiled, and she realized she'd learned to read the small changes in his expression, the softening around his eyes that meant genuine warmth, the slight tightening of his jaw that indicated worry, the way his shoulders dropped when he finally relaxed. "Come here," he said quietly. She stood and crossed to his desk. He pulled her down to sit on the edge, his hands warm on her waist. "We've been married 4 months," he said. "Survived a legal battle, a siege, and complete reconstruction of our local government. We've built a successful partnership and proved every doubter wrong. Is there a point to this summary? The point is we did all that while still keeping a wall between us. That connecting door, the separate lives, the careful distance." His eyes searched hers. "I'm tired of the wall, Eliza. If you are too." Her heart hammered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I married you for practical reasons. Partnership, mutual benefit, survival. But somewhere along the way it became more than that." He paused, choosing words carefully. "I don't know if it's love. I knew love with Anna, and this feels different, but it's real. And I'd like to find out what it could become if we stopped keeping each other at arm's length." Eliza's throat tightened. She'd felt it too, the shift from alliance to affection, from respect to something deeper. But she'd been afraid to name it, afraid of complicating what worked. "I'm not good at this," she admitted. "I've spent 12 years alone. I don't know how to be close to someone." "Neither do I. Been 8 years since Anna died, and I was bad at marriage even then." He touched her face gently. "But maybe we can figure it out together. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who chose each other trying to build something real. She leaned down and kissed him. It started tentative, careful, then deepened into something that felt like promise. When they broke apart, she was breathless. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try." That night, the connecting door stayed open. They moved slowly, carefully, learning each other with the same methodical attention they'd applied to everything else. It wasn't perfect. They were too old, too damaged, too set in their ways for perfection. But it was honest and warm and theirs. Afterward, lying in the dark with Caleb's breathing steady beside her, Eliza felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the quiet satisfaction of being exactly where she was supposed to be. The territorial investigation concluded in November with a comprehensive report that made headlines across 3 states. The Widows' Protection Ordinance was officially condemned as an instrument of corruption and property theft. 17 former council members and associates faced criminal charges. 32 women received restitution for property seized under false pretenses. The report praised Eliza by name for her courage in standing up to systemic abuse, and Caleb for providing refuge to vulnerable witnesses. It held them up as examples of how citizens could fight corruption through legal means and community organization. The attention was overwhelming. Newspapers requested interviews. Women's organizations invited her to speak. Other territories dealing with similar ordinances reached out for advice. Eliza declined most of it. She wasn't interested in being a symbol or a celebrity. She just wanted to live her life. But she did accept one invitation to speak at the Territorial Women's Assembly in Denver. Caleb came with her, and they spent 3 days in the Capitol meeting activists and reformers, learning about movements she'd never known existed. Standing before 200 women in a Denver assembly hall, Eliza felt terror and exhilaration in equal measure. "I'm not a hero," she began, voice shaking slightly. "I'm just someone who got tired of being afraid, tired of letting other people decide my worth, my future, my choices. The Widows' Protection Ordinance was meant to control us, to reduce us to property that could be redistributed among powerful men. We were supposed to accept it because that's what women do. Accept, adapt, survive quietly." She paused, looking out at the faces watching her. Young women and old, wealthy and poor, all united by the same fight. But we don't have to accept it. We can fight, not with violence, but with law, with organization, with the simple refusal to disappear when they want us to. My husband and I nearly lost everything fighting back. We were attacked, threatened, besieged. But we won because we stood together and because we understood that our individual fight was part of something bigger. The applause was deafening. Women stood, cheering, some crying. Eliza felt Caleb's hand find hers in the crowd, grounding her. After the speech, women surrounded her with questions, stories, requests for help with their own fights. She listened to each one, offered what advice she could, and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. This was her life now, not just running a ranch or serving on an advisory council, but being part of a movement that was slowly, painfully, reshaping how women were treated under territorial law. On the train ride home, exhausted and overwhelmed, she leaned against Caleb's shoulder. "Too much?" he asked. "A lot, but good." She watched the landscape roll past. Strange to think 6 months ago I was invisible. Now I'm apparently an inspiration. You were always worth noticing. People just weren't paying attention. Poet now, are you? Trying. He kissed the top of her head. You did well up there. Anna would have loved it. She always wanted to be part of something that mattered. It was the first time he'd mentioned his first wife without pain shadowing his voice. Eliza took it as progress. Tell me about her. Really tell me, not just the sad parts. So he did. Told her about Anna's laugh, her terrible cooking, her stubborn insistence on learning to ride even though she was afraid of horses. Told her about their fights and reconciliations, about dreams they'd shared and plans they'd never fulfilled. And Eliza told him about her parents, about the years after their death when she'd drifted from town to town, about the men she'd avoided and the loneliness she'd accepted as the price of safety. They traded histories like gifts, filling in the gaps between who they'd been and who they were becoming. Winter came hard that year. The first snow fell in early December, blanketing the valley in white. The ranch settled into its cold weather rhythm, reduced hours outside, more time maintaining equipment and planning for spring. Eliza used the slower season to expand her business further. She hired 2 local women to help with sewing, teaching them her techniques, building something that could grow beyond her personal capacity. Pearl supervised with her usual stern efficiency, turning the spare room into a proper workshop. Christmas approached, and for the first time in years, Eliza felt excited about it. She made gifts for everyone: new shirts for the ranch hands, a warm shawl for Pearl, embroidered handkerchiefs for Sarah and the women she'd fought alongside. For Caleb, she made a quilt, spent weeks on it, piecing together fabric in shades of blue and green that matched the valley in spring. Each stitch was deliberate, careful, an expression of something she still struggled to say out loud. She gave it to him Christmas morning, suddenly nervous. He unfolded it slowly, studying the pattern, running his hands over the detailed stitching. Then he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "This is beautiful." "It's practical. You need a warmer blanket." "It's beautiful," he repeated. "And it's more than a blanket. Thank you." He gave her a deed. She stared at it, confused, until she realized what she was holding. "You're giving me the shop building? My old shop in Redemption?" "Bradford's property was auctioned. I bought the building." He watched her face carefully. "Thought you might want it back. Could expand your business there, or sell it, or burn it down for all I care. But it should be yours." Eliza's vision blurred with tears. The building that had been used to trap her, now freed and returned. More than that, acknowledgement that her work mattered, that her business deserved room to grow. "I love you," she said, the words surprising her as much as him. Caleb went very still. "You sure about that?" "Completely." She laughed through tears. "I didn't plan it, didn't even realize it until just now, but it's true." He pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear. "I love you too. Have for a while now, just didn't know if you wanted to hear it." "I want to hear it. I want all of it." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "I want the partnership and the friendship and the love. Want to build a life that's big enough for both of us. Want to fight alongside you and rest beside you and figure out what comes next together." "That sounds like a plan." They spent Christmas with the ranch hands and Pearl, then drove to town for dinner with Sarah and Robert. The Mitchells' home was full of laughter and warmth, children running underfoot, neighbors stopping by with treats. Redemption was different now. Not perfect. There were still people who resented the changes, who missed the old power structure. But the fear was gone. Women walked the streets with their heads up. Businesses thrived without having to pay tribute to corrupt officials. It felt like a town that might actually deserve its name. New Year's arrived with fresh snow and clear skies. Eliza stood on the porch watching the sun rise over the valley, coffee in hand, Caleb's arm around her waist. "What do you want from this year?" he asked. "Peace, growth, maybe to finally finish that library reorganization you've been avoiding." She leaned into him. "What about you?" "Same. Plus expanding the cattle operation, fixing the north pasture drainage, and keeping you from working yourself to death with that sewing business." "You're one to talk about working yourself to death." "That's why we're perfect together. Mutual enabling." She laughed, and it felt good. Easy. Like happiness was something she was allowed to have. Spring came slowly, melting snow revealing green underneath. The ranch woke from its winter sleep, and work intensified. Calves were born, fences repaired, fields prepared for planting. Eliza's sewing business expanded into her old shop building. She hired 4 more women, created a structured training program, and started taking custom orders from as far as the territorial capital. The workshop buzzed with activity 6 days a week. Women bent over fabric and machines, creating beautiful things with skilled hands. She split her time between the ranch and town now, maintaining the balance between 2 lives that had somehow merged into one coherent whole. Wife, businesswoman, advisor, citizen. All of it felt right in a way nothing ever had before. The advisory council meetings became less contentious as the new government found its footing. They tackled real problems: infrastructure, education, economic development. Eliza found she had a talent for negotiation, for finding compromise between competing interests. Mayor Crane pulled her aside after one particularly productive meeting. "You ever consider running for territorial assembly? We need people like you in the capital." "I'm needed here." Redemption stabilized. You could make a bigger impact at the territorial level. She considered it. The idea of shaping policy for the entire territory was tempting. But she thought about the ranch, about her business, about the life she'd built with Caleb. "Maybe someday," she said, "but not yet. I'm still figuring out who I am when I'm not fighting for survival." "Fair enough. Offer stands when you're ready." That summer, they threw a party. A real one. The first the ranch had hosted in anyone's memory. They invited neighboring ranchers, the women from the resistance, Sarah and Robert, half of Redemption's new government, and anyone else who'd supported them. 50 people showed up. They roasted cattle, drank too much, danced under the stars. Marcus got into an argument with one of the new councilmen about water rights that somehow turned into a friendship. Pearl supervised everything with benevolent tyranny. Billy fell in love with one of Eliza's seamstresses, blushing every time she looked at him. Standing in the middle of it all, watching her neighbors and friends celebrate, Eliza felt overwhelmed by gratitude. This was what she'd fought for, not just freedom from the ordinance, but the right to build a life full of noise and connection and messy human joy. Caleb found her by the fire, handed her a drink. "Happy?" "Terrified you'll wake me up and it'll all be a dream." "Not a dream? Though sometimes it feels like one." He clinked his glass against hers. "To making our own luck. To making our own choices." They drank, and the party swirled around them. The Territorial Assembly passed new protections for women's property rights in August, citing the redemption case as justification. Eliza read the news in the territorial paper and felt pride mixed with relief. The fight had been worth it. The changes would outlast them. Autumn brought harvest in preparation for another winter. But this time, Eliza wasn't bracing for siege or attack. She was just planning for cold weather, for quiet months, for time to rest and plan for spring. She and Caleb celebrated their one-year anniversary quietly. Dinner at home, no witnesses except Pearl, who pretended not to notice the champagne. They exchanged gifts, practical things made meaningful by intention. A new saddle for her, a leather-bound journal for him, tokens of a life being built together one day at a time. 1 year, Eliza mused over dessert, feels like longer. We packed a lot into 12 months. Caleb reached across the table to take her hand. Trial, siege, revolution, rebuilding. Most people spread that out over a lifetime. "Are you complaining?" "Hell no, best year of my life, chaos and all." He paused. "You know what I want for next year?" "What?" "Boring. I want a boring year where nothing dramatic happens, and we just live." Eliza laughed. "That sounds perfect." They didn't get boring exactly, but they got normal. Days of work and nights of rest, small conflicts resolved through conversation, pleasures found in ordinary moments. They learned each other's rhythms, adjusted to shared life, figured out how to be partners in every sense. Eliza expanded her business again, opening a second location in a neighboring town. Hired 10 women total, created a cooperative structure where they all shared profits. It was successful beyond her expectations, profitable enough to support multiple families comfortably. She'd gone from invisible seamstress to employer, property owner, respected businesswoman. The transformation still surprised her sometimes. Caleb grew the ranch steadily, never recklessly. The alliance with neighboring ranchers evolved into a formal cooperative that negotiated better prices and shared resources. He was content in a way he hadn't been before, the edge of grief finally blunted by time and new purpose. They talked about children sometimes, carefully, knowing the fear that subject carried for Caleb after losing Anna and their daughter. Eliza wasn't sure she wanted them. 33 now, she'd spent so long imagining a childless future that reshaping it felt difficult. "No pressure," Caleb said one night when the subject came up. "We've got a good life. Don't need to add anything to feel complete. But if we wanted to, then we'd figure it out, same as everything else." He pulled her close. "Point is, whatever we choose is okay. There's no right answer except the one that works for us." They decided to wait. Maybe next year, maybe never. It was enough to know the choice was theirs. 2 years after the inquiry, Eliza stood in her workshop watching her employees work. 10 women, all skilled now, creating beautiful garments for customers across 3 territories. They laughed while they worked, shared stories, supported each other through personal crises. It was more than a business. It was a community. Mary Chen stopped by with fabric samples, her own merchant business thriving. "Heard you're thinking of opening a 3rd location." "Considering it. Haven't decided where yet." "Denver. Territorial capital needs good seamstresses, and you've got name recognition there. Mary set down her samples. I could partner with you, provide fabric at cost, we split space and overhead. It was a good offer. Eliza had learned to recognize opportunity when it presented itself. Let me talk to Caleb, but I'm interested. They shook on it, businesswomen negotiating as equals. Eliza watched Mary leave and felt satisfaction bloom in her chest. This was power, not the kind the council had wielded, built on control and intimidation, but real power earned through competence and mutual respect. That evening, she discussed it with Caleb over dinner. Denver's far, he said thoughtfully. You'd need to spend time there, at least initially. I know. Would that bother you? I'd miss you, but I'm not going to clip your wings because I'm selfish. He considered. Maybe I come with you sometimes. We could use a pied-à-terre in the capital, be useful for business. They planned it together, mapping out expansion with the same careful strategy they'd applied to everything else. By the time Pearl brought dessert, they'd sketched out a 5-year business plan and decided to buy property in Denver. Life had become bigger than either of them had imagined. Not just surviving, but thriving. Building an empire from nothing but determination and partnership. 3 years after the inquiry, the Widows' Protection Ordinance was taught in territorial schools as a cautionary tale about corruption and the importance of civil rights. Eliza's testimony was part of the historical record, her words preserved for future generations. She tried not to think about that too much. Fame made her uncomfortable. She preferred the quiet satisfaction of work well done, businesses built, women employed, choices protected. But when young women wrote asking for advice, she answered every letter. When communities facing similar corruption reached out, she shared what she'd learned. Her fight had become a template, and she owed it to others to pass along the knowledge. Sarah's daughter asked her to speak at her school graduation. Eliza stood before 50 young women and told them the truth. You're going to face people who try to make you small, who tell you to accept less, want less, be less. You're going to be told that survival means compliance, that safety means invisibility. She paused, meeting young eyes full of hope and fear. Don't believe them. You can fight. You can win. You can build lives bigger than anyone expects. It won't be easy, and it won't be safe, but it will be yours. The standing ovation made her tear up. After, girls surrounded her with questions and thank yous, seeing her as proof that fighting back was possible. Caleb waited by the wagon, smiling. Local hero now? I'd settle for competent business owner. But she was smiling too. They drove home through familiar landscape. The valley spread out in evening light. 5 years in this place, and it had become more than property. It was home in a way nowhere else had ever been. Pearl had dinner waiting. They ate together, the three of them, with Billy and his new wife joining them. The table that had once seated two in awkward silence now hosted conversation and laughter, family built from choice rather than blood. That night, lying in bed with Caleb reading beside her, Eliza thought about the journey from invisible seamstress to the life she had now. The terror and triumph, the loss and gain, the moments when she'd nearly broken, and the moments when she'd discovered she was stronger than she knew. What are you thinking about? Caleb asked, setting down his book. Gratitude, and how strange it is that the worst thing that ever happened to me, being cornered by the council, led to the best thing. Meeting me? He tried to sound arrogant but couldn't quite pull it off. Meeting you, fighting beside you, building this. She gestured to encompass the room, the house, the ranch, everything they'd created. I was so afraid that day you walked into my shop. Thought I was choosing the lesser of evils. You were. But it turned out not to be evil at all, just complicated and difficult and real. She rolled over to face him. I love you. I love this life. I love who I've become, and I wouldn't change any of it. Even the siege? Even the siege. Because it proved we could survive anything together. He pulled her close, and they lay in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other through desperation and stayed through choice. Outside, the valley settled into night. Cattle lowed in distant pastures. Wind moved through the grass. Stars emerged one by one, ancient and indifferent to human struggle. But inside, warmth and safety and hard-won peace. Inside, two people who'd refused to disappear when the world tried to erase them. Inside, proof that fighting back was worth it, that partnership could defeat corruption, that love built on respect and equality could thrive even in the hardest soil. Eliza had started with nothing. No voice, no choice, no future. She'd ended with everything that mattered: love, power, and a life she'd chosen. She closed her eyes and slept without fear, dreaming of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that, building a legacy that would outlast them both. The invisible woman had become unforgettable, and she was just getting started.